Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Mme McCarthy.
Monsieur le Sénateur Routier.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Ozef.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur McLean. Monsieur le Sénateur Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Farnham.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Green. Madame le Sénateur Ferguson.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Madame le Connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur. Monsieur le Connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Madame le Député Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Southern. Madame le Député de Grouville.
Présente.
Madame le Député Hilton.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Lefondre.
Présent.
Madame le Député de la Trinité.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Louis de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Tadier. Monsieur le Député Noel. Madame le Député de Saint-Jean. Monsieur le Député Higgins.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Masson. Madame le Député Pinnell.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Martin.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Bryans.
Présent.
Madame le Député de Saint-Pierre. Monsieur le Député Rondel.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Mézec. Monsieur le Député Louis de Saint-Hélier.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Bron.
Présent.
Madame le Député Dublay. Monsieur le Député Labbé.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Wickenden.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Bray.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Norton. Monsieur le Député MacDonald.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Truscott.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député McClinton.
Mme McCarthy.
Prions Dieu, notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait le ciel et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous avait commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton Saint-Nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération ait été accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple qui te plut de commettre à le soin, car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant « Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite dans la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous induis pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi la reine, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen. Monsieur le Sénateur McLean.
Defo.
Sir, if I may, Senator McLean stuck in the UK due to fog, but hopes to get back here perhaps for this afternoon's sitting, sir. Can I ask you to be excused, eh?
Mr. Green.
Monsieur le Sénateur Green.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Southern. Monsieur le Député Tadier. Monsieur le Député Masson.
Présent.
Madame le Député de Saint-Pierre.
Sir, may I ask the Deputy of St Peter be defo excusée? She has a medical appointment to attend to and will be here very shortly. Thank you.
Very well. Defo excusez.
Monsieur le Député Mézec. Madame le Député Dublay.
Sir, could I ask the Deputy Dublay is defo excusée? She has a medical appointment and hopes to be here later on in the day.
Very well.
Monsieur le Député Norton.
Présent.
Les États sont constitués. On behalf of members, I would like to welcome His Excellency, the Lieutenant Governor, to the Chamber this morning. There are a number of subordinate enactments under B on the consolidated order paper, and a number of matters have been presented or laid as described on the consolidated order paper under section C. The following propositions have been notified under section D. Draft Commissioner for Standards Jersey Law at P87 of 2016 amendment lodged by the Chief Minister. The Jersey Appointments Commission reappointment of Commissioner lodged on the 17th of October by the State's Employment Board. The Draft Employment Minimum Wage Amendment number 13 Jersey Regulations lodged on the 17th of October by the Minister for Social Security. The Draft United Nations Financial Sanctions Jersey Law lodged on the 18th of October by the Minister for External Relations. The Draft Budget Statement 2017 lodged on the 18th of October by the Minister for Treasury and Resources. The Future Hospital Preferred Site lodged on the 19th of October by the Council of Ministers. The Draft Taxation Implementation International Tax Compliance Country-by-Country Reporting BEPS Jersey Regulations lodged on the 20th of October by the Minister for External Relations. The Greville Bathe Fund Appointment of Jurat lodged on the 25th of October by the Minister for Treasury and Resources. The Draft Finance 2017 Budget Jersey Law lodged on the 1st of November by the Minister for Treasury and Resources, and the Draft Roadworks and Events Jersey Law 2016 Appointed Day Act lodged on the 1st of November by the Minister for Infrastructure. There are no matters under E, F, G, H or I, and we come then to questions. Firstly, written questions. The Minister for External Relations will table an answer to a question asked by the Deputy of Grouville regarding Jersey's membership of the Common Travel Area. The Attorney General will table an answer to a question asked by the Connétable of Grouville regarding the potential for different minimum wages to be applied. The Minister for Social Security will table an answer to a question asked by the Deputy of St. Juan regarding employees on zero-hour contracts. The Minister for Treasury and Resources will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Tadier regarding the tax liability of official emoluments of the Lieutenant Governor. The Minister for Education will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Tadier regarding fees for GCSE resets at Highlands. The Chief Minister will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Mezek regarding the granting of entitled status on economic and social grounds. The Minister for Treasury and Resources will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Mezek regarding the proportion of earnings paid in GST. The Chief Minister will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Mezek regarding visits undertaken by elected members of the government and officers of the state's departments. The Minister for Treasury and Resources will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Mezek regarding the proportion of earners with 0% rate of income tax. The Minister for Infrastructure will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Tadier regarding the voting rights at general meetings of non-freehold tenants and leaseholders of Les Kennevets Park and Clos de Sable. The Minister for Treasury and Resources will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Lefondre regarding the allocation of the Strategic Reserve. The Minister for Health and Social Services will table an answer to a question asked by Senator Ferguson regarding the employment of social workers. The Minister for Social Security will table an answer to a question asked by Senator Ferguson regarding the access to benefits administered by the Department of People Returning to Jersey. The Minister for Health and Social Services will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Southern regarding the funding of home care. The Chief Minister will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Southern regarding the impact of Brexit on Jersey banks. The Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Tadier regarding the play park at Les Kennevets playing fields. The Minister for Education will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Tadier regarding means testing for access to the Nursery Education Fund. The Attorney General will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Higgins regarding the accountability and liability of centenniers. The Attorney General will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Higgins regarding the employment and liability of Crown advocates and police legal advisors. The Attorney General will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Higgins regarding measures taken by the Law Officers Department to ensure the timeliness of provision of information and records. The Chief Minister will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Higgins regarding the publication of a document to inform the public on whom summons may be served. The Chief Minister will table an answer to a question asked by Deputy Higgins regarding the defence of defamatory statements. We come now to oral questions, and the first question Deputy Tadier will ask of the Minister for Education. Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir. Will the Minister advise what consultation and negotiations, if any, have taken place with teachers and their representatives in the last month over plans to reduce newly qualified teachers' salaries? And will he state whether the profession has been supportive of those plans?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I think members will remember that with regard to negotiations, I as a minister don't play any part in those negotiations. Those negotiations will be with the States Employment Board, with union officials and with senior colleagues, senior officers at the department. Since the Assembly last met, we've had no formal negotiations and no formal conversations. We do meet regularly with the unions. Last time we met was just after the last Assembly, and they voiced their concerns quite robustly. Since that point, I've met informally with teachers both on island and off island. All but one of the teachers on island said they understand what I was trying to do. And for the teachers off island, they said they were really surprised at the level of pay that we were paying. Thank you, sir.
I thank the Minister for the answer, which is basically a no, but I'm sure negotiations will happen in due course. Will he answer perhaps again the second part of the question? Is the profession in Jersey supportive of the plans that the Minister is putting forward, does he think?
Thank you, sir. Like I said, I have met with some teachers. It's only been a short while. It's only been 3 weeks since the Assembly last met. Obviously, we had a half-term during that period. So I haven't met with that many teachers. But like I say, all of the ones that I have met, except one, who did equally voice his concerns, similar to that of the unions, said they understood what I was trying to do.
Deputy Sultan.
Does the Minister not consider that such an issue as are the pay rates, scales for pay of Jersey teachers are a matter of some urgency in order to be settled so that bodies can move on to discuss the restructuring of the profession in Jersey?
Yes, sir, I understand the Deputy is concerned about urgency, but as I say, this is out of my hands now. These will be with the States Employment Board. They have their own timetable with regard to these negotiations. Again, it will be with officers and it will be with union members.
Final supplementary, Deputy Hadley.
Yes, so what would the Minister say to the daughter of one of my constituents who recently left a relatively high-paid job, certainly higher than that of a newly qualified teacher or even an existing teacher, to retrain as a teacher to come back to Jersey, only to find out that perhaps in 2 years' time her starting salary will be reduced by some £8,000? Does the Minister think that actually the reality for many of these students need to form part of the negotiations that will be ongoing between both his department and the States Employment Board?
Thank you, sir. I think if this particular student were to come back, she'd still be delighted with the consideration that the amount that we would be paying would be considerably more than inner city London, more than Guernsey. And if she was an NQT going back to or staying in the UK, she'd be on an income considerably less.
Well, that brings us to the next question. That Deputy.
So I believe, again, the Minister has misled the House.
Sorry, please. You must mean, and presumably unintentionally misled the House, which is what I will assume that you mean. But the Minister's answer is the Minister's answer. It can be dealt with in questions later on, but it can't be dealt with in this way, I'm afraid. The next question, Deputy Lewis, will ask of the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Deputy Lewis.
Thank you, sir. Further to the announcement that the post office at Five Oaks may be closed, what steps is the Minister taking to ensure that a post office is maintained in the area?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Neither the Treasury Minister nor I have an operational role to play in the ongoing business of Jersey Post. Whilst it is acknowledged that it is a wholly owned incorporated entity of the States of Jersey, it has its own board of directors approved by this Assembly that provide operational direction to its executive. Therefore, as members would expect, the matter of providing a post office in Five Oaks is purely a matter for Jersey Post. However, to assist the good deputy, I can assure him that Jersey Post are conscious that the post office at Five Oaks is very much part of the community and are very disappointed that the service can no longer continue within its current location. The decision to close the existing post office has resulted from the current leaseholder choosing not to renew their lease on the property and at very short notice. rather than Jersey Post electing to discontinue that service. In conclusion, sir, we are advised by and are confident that Jersey Post is taking all appropriate and urgent action to try and find an acceptable alternative solution. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. I have had communication from the Chief Executive of Jersey Post, sir, for which I am most grateful. Also, the Constable St Saviour has been very active in this regard. But does the Assistant Minister not agree that a post office at Five Oaks servicing Victoria Cottage Homes, the new Langtree Gardens estate and the whole surrounding area is a vital service for the area? Sir?
Certainly, sir. The Treasury Minister and I are very conscious of that concern, and as are Jersey Post. They have been within days of being notified. They've been out talking to many businesses in the Five Oaks area, in the hope that one may even take over the service on a temporary basis, particularly as we're now approaching the busiest part of the year for Jersey Post, and would have a potentially negative effect on their business. So they are extremely focused in finding a solution, even if it is only a temporary one in the short term, sir. Thank you.
Final supplementary? I called on final supplementary, Senator, before your light was on. We now come to question 3 that Deputy Mezek will ask of the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy Mezek.
What meetings, if any, has the Minister had with the representatives of the workers who will be affected by his decision to cut funding for family nursing and home care?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I've not had any meetings with the representatives of the workers affected, nor would it be appropriate for me to do so. I have said previously, decisions about services and staffing arrangements are a matter, and properly a matter, for family nursing and home care, sir.
Supplementary, sir, but of course the decisions he make will have a real tangible effect on the service that this organisation provides, a service that is valued by virtually everybody in this community, but most importantly, those workers and their representatives want to meet with the Minister to talk about this. Simply out of courtesy, would it not be a good idea to get round a table and just have a chat with them about him, or is that honestly beyond his abilities to somehow muster?
Sir, there's only one point I agree with the Deputy with in his question, is that the family nursing services are essential, they're valued, and they're much loved in this island, sir. And we're working with family nursing to modernise the service, and it's a challenge for them, but they are taking that role seriously. So the Unite official asked me to meet to discuss it, and I stand by what I said originally. However, he also said to me that I had made different comments, different or contrary to those made by family nursing, sir. And I did offer to answer any questions he put to me on the clear understanding that I would reply to him and copy it to family nursing, sir. So we are not in a dispute with family nursing. Family nursing and I are working together to improve services, to provide better services, to change the way things are done going into the future.
Deputy Sutton.
Does the Minister believe that the prospect of major changes to terms and conditions in family nursing and home care is a serious concern and worry to the employees in that particular organisation? And will he, and does he consider that changes in terms and conditions may well affect the safe practices and good quality of practice that currently exist within family nursing and home care?
So dealing with the last part of the question first, no, I do not consider changes in terms and conditions to put at risk patients. That's what the Deputy is in essence asking me. So the services are properly regulated and controlled, and we're about to appoint a care commissioner. So I'm comfortable in that respect, sir. But managing change is always difficult, and family nursing are facing up to the challenge that they have to. Of course it's difficult for the staff. The services are much valued, the staff are much valued, but they have to be allowed to work their way through the solution. I might add, sir, that I met on Friday with the senior management, well, the chief executive and the chairman of family nursing. We had an excellent meeting, sir, and we've agreed, though, that they might need a little longer to manage the change that they're having to go through. So I have agreed that we would not seek to make any change until July next year, sir.
Deputy Lewis, St Saviour's.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister not agree, sir, that family nursing and home care provide an absolutely essential service with regard to care in the community? And will he not also agree that things regarding privatisation, for want of a better word, is happening in the UK, where things are going south at a rate of knots, and that we must not let this happen in Jersey? Thanks, sir.
I totally agree with the member. That's why we're fully funding district nursing, fully funding health visiting, fully funding reablement, fully funding rapid response, fully funding children's services, including a new palliative care service. So when the budget is worked out, family nursing will have a figure very similar to the one they've currently got. The only change will be around home care, which I am not going to continue to pay way over market rate for that service, sir. Family nursing are an excellent organisation, but they're trying to take their service through modernisation to meet the needs of an ageing population, and I'm supporting them fully in that role, sir.
Deputy St Wong.
Would the Minister elaborate on the statement he made just a few minutes ago that he is not making any changes until July? Does this mean that the grant to family nursing will continue for the first part of next year until July at the same levels as the grant has been in this current year?
That is what we're discussing, so it's likely to be yes, sir.
Has the decision been made? Because the Minister indicated before that he will not be making any changes until July. What exactly does that mean?
What I actually said, sir, was that I'd met with family nursing. We'd had an excellent meeting, and we're looking at July as a possible start date next year. We're still in discussions with family nursing.
Deputy Taddy.
So I don't know if I'm allowed to ask the Minister whether his comments are disingenuous when he says that family nursing are trying to modernise, no, and he is taking them through that. But if that's not, sir, if that's not,
suggestion of disingenuousness is not an appropriate.
So I withdraw that, sir. I would simply say, is it not incorrect when the Minister stands up in this Assembly to say family nursing want to go through a modernisation process and I'm simply there to help them? The reality is that the Minister and the Council of Ministers wants the family nursing to modernise, in inverted commas, to save money, and that actually they are being pressurised to do that. And there is great resistance actually from family nursing and from the public because they're scared about what might happen to that much valued and effective service that currently exists.
The only people causing scare and concern, sir, is Deputy Tadia and the like, sir, because what we're doing here, sir, is we have increased expenditure on reablement. We have increased expenditure on rapid response. We have supported family nursing in providing a new children's service, including palliative care, sir. This is about change to meet the modern society, sir, not about fear.
Senator Ferguson.
Yes, sir. Does the Minister not realise that the home care, which is more than just going around doing a bit of dusting, the home care is an essential part of family nursing, and to increase the rate from £11 an hour to £19 an hour is going to take it out of the reach of quite a lot of old age pensioners. And when he is busy saying we must look after our oldies in the home, and then he's taking the service away, what is he to say to that?
Well, first of all, sir, I take exception to being called an oldie. I'm a pensioner myself, sir, and I don't consider myself to be an oldie. But anyway, answering the question that the Senator asked, why should they pay £19 an hour when they can get it for £12 an hour? That's precisely what modernisation is about.
Deputy Moore?
I understand his comment.
It's a supplement. Yes.
Sir, I asked a rhetorical question, is why should service users pay £19 an hour when they can get it for £12 an hour? That's what this change is about, sir.
No, it isn't, sir.
No, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Senator. Firstly, this is not an opportunity for argument or debate. It's an opportunity for asking questions and receiving information, or asking for action. Secondly, you've had a supplementary to your original question. Deputy Martin.
And actually, I thought Senator Ferguson was going to ask my question. In a way, she did. I'm concerned. Is the Health Minister saying the strategy is to keep elderly people in their homes as long as possible? The arms are nursing, but the home care part must be as equal. If I'm elderly and a nurse is going to be coming in and doing my dressing, but nobody's going to do my work or my shopping, I cannot stay in my own home. Does the Minister not understand the equalness that he should be, which is quite frightening that he's not, taking the home care part of staying in your own home for as long as possible, sir? Thank you.
So I totally understand. I don't think the Deputy understands there's no need to pay £19 an hour for a service that should be £12 an hour. The service will still be provided.
Final supplementary, Deputy Mayor.
Sir, in answer to a previous question, the Minister cast aspersions against Deputy Southern, saying that he was the one causing the fear here, when in actual fact Deputy Southern was doing nothing other than relay the concerns that the workers for this service have put to him directly, put to me directly, Deputy Tadyer and Senator Ferguson. Again, I ask a question, he's not even listening to it, so I don't know why I'm bothering. It would be good if he might like to indicate that he's listening.
Deputy, firstly, please could we not have a discussion across the floor?
Well, I mean, maybe ministers should actually listen to questions when they're being put to them.
Secondly, you haven't actually asked a question yet.
Yes, sir. I'm in the process of asking a question. That's what this is for. And ministers don't listen, and you stand up for them as usual. So I ask the question to him.
Deputy,
Can I ask my question, sir?
I must ask you firstly to sit down because I'm talking. Secondly, I must ask you to withdraw the allegations against the Chair. The Chair is favouring one side over the other. That is simply not the case. And yes, now you may ask your question.
I will withdraw that if I'm able to ask my question and the Minister will actually bother to listen to it, sir. Can we proceed on that basis?
Well, it's not a question of proceeding. I've invited you to ask your question. Please do.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister agree that if he met with the workers for this service, he would be able to proceed from a position of strength because he would understand the concerns they have made, concerns which they uniquely have, which are not shared by the Chief Executive? I know that there's a difference of opinion between those workers. That's the point that Deputy Southern was trying to get across. Would he accept that his position would be strengthened if he met these workers and their representatives face to face? And if he accepts that point, I'm more than happy to facilitate that meeting for him. Would he not agree?
Minister.
So it's just not appropriate for me to meet directly with employees of other organisations, sir. I'm sorry, but that's the case. By the way, I do withdraw the comment I made. It wasn't about Deputy Southern, actually. I think I said Deputy Tadyer, so I withdraw that comment, sir.
We now come to question 4. The Deputy Southern will ask the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy Southern.
Yes, sir, and I hope nobody gets afraid of this question. How many applicants for long-term care benefit have been processed since its introduction, and with what average waiting time? How many applicants for both long-term care and the new income support personal care component 4 are expected on an annual basis? And what contingency plans, if any, are under consideration to ensure the proper level of funding is in place for 1st of January 2017?
Minister.
So I apologise in advance. This is quite a long answer, but that was a multifaceted question. So I do not have the number of applicants for long-term care benefits since the introduction. The average waiting times, as we would need to look back through every single application. However, thanks to my colleague, the Social Security Minister, I can give you some information about current waiting times. So I am informed that new claims, where all the information from the customer, including the proofs, copies of the information required, and provided the information is available from my department, these are processed straight away. Separately, 31 claims that feature changes in circumstances are currently being processed. There are 107 claims that are in the process of being assessed by my department for onward transmission to Social Security for processing. The number of applicants for both long-term care and the income support component 4 is expected on an annual basis, I've answered in the written question. The number of new applications for the proposed flexible personal care component will depend on the number of new clients who choose to make an application for income support following the introduction of the new component. Many of the family nursing and home care clients already receive income support. Picking up on the contingency plans that the Deputy asked me about, following discussions between social services and family nursing and home care, it has been agreed that we are likely to continue the subsidy until at least July 2017, therefore building in the contingency that the Deputy was referring to, sir.
I thank the Minister for showing due consideration to the reality of the size of the task facing him with 107 new applicants and 31 changes of circumstance waiting to be delivered. It seems unlikely to me that those are going to be processed given the history of waiting times in the period between now and January the 1st. But does he not consider that his wish to fully fund particular services is rather held back by the fact, as is mentioned in the answer to question 14, that the delivery of funding takes place in 1, 2, 3 tranches, only 3 tranches, where in 2016, nearly £6 million is allocated as a lump sum to go between district nursing, home care, children's services, health visiting, school nurses, community paediatrics. Would it be not better place to start from if he had a fair idea of where those 6 services, how those 6 services, and what extent they were being funded separately rather than as a lump sum of £6 million?
Sir, for once, Deputy Southern and I are absolutely at one, and for that reason my office has met with the finance team of family nursing to break down those figures and to fully understand what fully funded means for each of the items or services that I've mentioned before. I totally agree with the Deputy, and we're working on that, sir.
Final supplementary, Deputy Southern.
The Minister misses the point. Does he not consider that it would have been better to have sorted this well in advance of changing the funding stream for home care so that he had something in place? This is 2015, £6.4 million, 2016, £5.9 million, lump sums sitting there unanalysed. Why did he not have a better breakdown before he went into this negotiation, and then we may not have had the trouble we've had?
So I'm not in the process of passing the buck on this one. The fact is we didn't. We now accept that we should have. We started work on it last year, but we had a detailed meeting about it yesterday, and that's where we are, sir.
Well, we now come to question 5 that Senator Ferguson will ask for the Minister for Infrastructure. Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. Has the department exceeded its discharge limits for total nitrogen from the Bellazan sewage treatment plant into St Albans Bay? And if so, by how much and for how long?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. The department has exceeded its total nitrogen limit on the discharge from the sewage treatment works and has done so since the limit was first introduced in the late 1990s. So this is not new information. On average, it is 4 times higher than the limit of 10 milligrams per litre that was imposed by the regulator. However, it can peak to over 6 times higher at certain periods. This stringent standard was introduced in the 1990s after an upgrade to cope with an increasing population and was based on compliance with the European Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. The limit was imposed as a precautionary measure at the time to protect St Albans Bay. However, this was based on just one summer season of sampling and testing. Subsequent testing of the bay has shown that, in fact, no nitrogen removal would be required under the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive.
Does the Minister consider that the proposed new plant will be sufficient to deal with this problem? And does he perhaps not think that the population part of the policies of the Council of Ministers should be dealt with urgently in order to prevent recurrence of this as the new plant comes on stream?
Minister, yes. Sorry, is there...
That's the trouble when you don't use them, eh?
They're back.
Right. Very well, Minister. If, I think you may have a problem alone there.
Yes.
But,
So the new plant has been designed for a population based on grosser. It's been designed for a population of 118,000 islanders, plus further expansion of 20%, sir. That takes us up to a population, including visitors, obviously of some 140,000. So you can't just base the plant on those living in the island. You have to base it on the population at any one time, including our tourism numbers, sir.
Deputy Lewis, something?
Thank you, sir. There's been much speculation about the contribution that this outfall makes to the sea lettuce in St Albans Bay. I wonder if the Minister could clarify as to whether this does contribute very much to that issue or not. There seems to be some conflicting information out there, both from your department and other independent bodies, as to whether it is having much impact at all. I'm sure it's one component of many that is contributing to it. Perhaps the Minister could clarify. Thank you.
Sir, thank you. I'm going to read out a few short quotes, if I may, sir, to give it onto this. Despite recent opinions about the cause, it is clear that the blooms were not just caused by human-made nutrients flowing into the harbour, as some people believe. And a second quote, sir, sea lettuce is a naturally occurring algae. The variations is abundance from year to year, and place to place, and strongly influenced by uncontrollable factors such as wind, tide, and coastal currents, which affect water temperatures and nutrient levels. So I quote from an article that was published in New Zealand, because this is not just a problem for St Albans Bay, sir. It's not just a problem for the French coast. It is a worldwide problem. And so, in the direct answer to Deputy Kevin Lewis, Andrew Lewis's question, sir, I don't believe that the outflow from the sewage treatment works, or indeed the outflow from the streams going into St Albans Bay from our watercourse, are the sole cause of the blooms that we get in St Albans Bay over the last few summers, sir. They certainly add to the problem, but they are not the cause. We have a report that was commissioned by the Department of the Environment by a firm experts called Cascade, which clearly show that, in fact, as you go out towards the Minkies and towards into the Bay of St Malo, that nitrate levels continue to rise, sir. And so some 80+% of the nitrates in St Albans Bay are actually coming from offshore Jersey, sir.
Deputy Taddy.
So, notwithstanding what the Minister just said, I think that SOS's research is at odds with Save Our Shoreline, that is. We see pictures following the outflow where the green algae is there, almost like a tree coming out from the sewage outlet, sir. So I think that point is moot. But does the Minister agree with me that it's actually important to treat the cause here, not just the symptoms? And I know that he supports user pays in Jersey increasingly, but does he also support polluter pays in this instance?
So I encourage Deputy Tadger to relook at those images produced by Save Our Shoreline, because his interpretation is certainly not my interpretation, sir. But I do agree with him that we do need to tackle the cause. And the cause of the high nitrate levels in our water is because it's in our water. It's not because it's necessarily in our sewage treatment plants. When you've got water coming out of your tap, sir, that's 40 to 50 milligrams per litre, then it's not surprising that the water that's coming from the sewage treatment plant will have a similar level of nitrates in that water, sir.
And a supplementary, what work has been done to identify why we have high levels of nitrate, and what solutions will the department work on, along with the Environment Minister, to make sure that actually there's an incentive for those putting nitrates into the water table to stop doing that?
Sir, the Deputy should avail himself of the information that's already been published but by my colleague, the Environment Minister. And we are working with Jersey Water, we are working with the farming community to reduce nitrates levels, and there has been some significant improvements over recent years, sir.
Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. I'm just following up an earlier comment made by the Minister, and just to see if I heard correctly. Did the Minister say that the flow of nitrogen into the bay has exceeded almost from the time the plant was established, and in breach of what the regulations were? If that is the case, what did the regulator do? Did they fine you? Did they take any action against the Department of Infrastructure, or what?
So again, I'm quite happy to confirm it's not news. But since the limits were set in the 1990s, we haven't met those limits, sir. But when you have your mains water coming out the tap at 40 to 50 milligrams per litre, you're not going to get your water coming out the sewage treatment works at anything less, sir.
Supplementary, sir. My question was about the regulator and the relationship between the regulator and the Minister's department. If you were exceeding the limits, what sanctions were available to the regulator, and why weren't they used?
So that's a question to the regulator, not to myself, sir.
Very well. Comment to Albert Greville.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister confirm or otherwise that the limit set for the effluent going into the bay is 1/5 of that is considered safe for drinking water?
So I know that our drinking water is typically between 40 to 50 milligrams per litre, and that's the amount of what we're putting into the bay from the sewage treatment works is at a similar level. But yes, our regulated level is at 10 milligrams per litre, so a quarter to a fifth of what the Constable has mentioned, sir.
Well, I have Deputy Tadier, then there'll be a final supplementary. Deputy Tadier.
Can the Minister confirm whether, in fact, dispensations have been issued recently or historically in recent times so that actually Jersey Water can continue to give us the high nitrate water coming out of our taps without facing any kind of sanctions on them?
So again, I'm not the regulator. It's not a question for my department, sir. But as far as I'm aware, I believe that the Deputy Head here is correct, sir.
And would you be able to find out, because I'm sure ministers work together, he works very closely, he's told us, with the Environment Minister, when these dispensations were actually made and whether that's a sustainable way forward. Surely we have laws and limits in place, and if they can be constantly broken with impunity, then that must be not just a democratic problem, but also a health problem for our residents.
Sir, I don't need to ask the Deputy Tadier's questions for him. He's quite capable of asking those questions directly to the department and getting those answers, sir. They're in the public domain.
Very well. Final supplementary, Senator Ferguson.
Thank you. The Minister has placed great reliance on a particular report. Is the Minister aware of the approach taken in the report he quoted, that the results were taken on one day in a straight line with no allowance for seasonality, no results done over a period, and as such, from the scientific point of view, the report is severely flawed?
So I take advice from a whole raft of experts, sir, and in this particular case, the Senator is correct. The testing that was done was on one particular day, and because of that, sir, I've asked for it to be redone but by my department, and that's something that we'll be doing over the next few months and continue, sir.
Very well. We now come to question 6. The Deputy of Grouville will ask of the Chief Minister. Deputy of Grouville.
Thank you, sir. Are the conditions applied to the residential and employment status of high net worth individuals restricted to their place of residence? And are they permitted to purchase buy-to-let properties? And if so, are they required to live in Jersey?
Chief Minister.
So could I ask the Assistant Minister to answer this, please?
Assistant Minister.
Thank you, sir. High net worth individuals moving to Jersey and granted 21E entitled status are expected to make an annual minimum income tax contribution of £125,000, which relies on them remaining resident. They are granted permission to purchase their own home, but they are not permitted to buy any other properties to rent out. and we have and would refuse such requests. However, just as anyone else, they are able to buy share transfer flats. So they are restricted in what they can do and where they can live, and they are required to bring substantial benefit to our island, and I believe we should welcome this.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. Does the Assistant Chief Minister have any data to indicate the extent that the housing, the share transfer housing, is being bought by the individuals with 2(1)E status? And indeed, does he have any data indicating how many non-residents of Jersey own these share transfer flats or properties?
So I don't, to hand, I certainly don't have that sort of information. There was some work done on that a couple of years ago, but I believe that there is a supply of share transfer properties within our island, and that was recognised as being a useful thing to produce an increased market for rental property. And whoever is going to be purchasing those properties, it was felt to be of good benefit to our local population, so that they could have access to rental properties. But with regard to numbers, I'm afraid I don't have that information here.
Senator Ferguson?
Yes, for the benefit of the Deputy of Grouville, it is quite easy to work out how many share transfer properties are in private names. However, my question is, what restrictions are there on 2(1)E residents buying additional properties, either for redevelopment or restoration or such purposes, and reselling?
Yes.
There have been a very limited number of applications from 2(1)Es to redeveloped properties. This has been given in exceptional circumstances where it is recognised that they are going to resell the property later, and that there is same with any property development company, they would be required to sell that property on, and also obviously they would be paying tax on any profit they would make on that.
Supplementary, sir. Are there any restrictions on the fact that the redevelopments tend to be for large properties which are then sold on to more 2(1)Es?
There would be no restrictions as far as the Control of Housing and Work law would have effect on. Certainly the planning department applications would look at that sort of issue, but certainly there isn't any restriction with regard to Control of Housing and Work law.
Deputy Ladden?
I'll go anyway. Yeah. I wonder if I might ask the Assistant Chief Minister a question. Same questions I asked the Housing Minister, but was unable to get particularly satisfactory answers with respect to the lady. But is the government aware of a resurgent buy-to-let market? Is the government at all concerned that such a resurgence in buy-to-let, with wealthy companies gobbling up properties, is the government concerned that this would deter or harm the opportunities for local families to get on the housing ladder? In short, is the government on the case here?
If the Deputy has some information he'd like to share with us to give some evidence that that is actually happening, I would really welcome that. There certainly has nothing been brought to my attention with regard to people buying buy-to-let places to the detriment of the local population at the present time. But certainly if he has any information saying that's opposite to that, I'd be very happy to listen to it.
Deputy Tadier?
So would the Assistant Minister confirm whether it is the general policy of the Council of Ministers to encourage home ownership, i.e. Where owner-occupied homes to increase?
Very plainly, yes.
So supplementary in that case, does the Minister not accept that it necessarily follows that every buy-to-let property in the island is a home that can't be owned by a family, an owner-occupier? Is that not the case?
No, that isn't the case at all. The buy-to-let market is actually a very useful mechanism to ensure there's a supply of properties for people who actually want to rent as opposed to buy. There is a choice to be made by people, and some residents who have the ability to occupy property in the island can have the choice of either renting or buying.
Deputy Higgins.
Doesn't the Assistant Chief Minister understand that if wealthy people or people from outside the island are buying buy-to-let properties, one, they're pushing up prices, and secondly, they're reducing the supply of housing to ordinary people because they're actually pricing people out of the market? Because the return that you see in the newspapers is 5% or more.
Could you ask a question, please?
Well, the question was, does he not accept that buy-to-let properties are pushing up prices and are denying local residents decent housing at a decent price?
The economics of the housing market is a very variable situation. Depends on the supply that is within our market, which will affect the prices. And we do know that that there is a demand for. There is a demand for all sorts of housing, whether it be rental or buying. So for the extent of this question has actually moved away from talking about 2-1Es accessing the housing market, but that's the way question. I haven't got an answer to that question. I'm sorry.
So I have Deputy Southern followed by Deputy Tadier, then as final supplementary, Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. I question the Minister suggesting that somebody would want to spend twice the rate of a mortgage renting a home. Makes sense to me. But my question is, can the Minister assure us that whatever the sources of profits from property, whether it's rental profit or redevelopment profit, those profits are taxed at 20%, whether it's a company or an individual in the island?
Yep. Any property development is at 20%, certainly.
And rental properties? So company rents, buys a let, and you've got a net profit in the company, that pays at 20%?
Yes, it's same at 20%.
Deputy Tadier.
So I'm surprised the Assistant Minister can't see the axiomatically true statement that actually if 10 properties are owned by one landlord, those 10 properties can't be owned by 10 property owners, and that is simply a statement of fact. But does the Minister accept that actually whether it's 1-1Ks or 2-1Es now, or private developers or investors in other ways, that the problem is that we have no information about ownership in Jersey because there isn't a property register, and we don't know about the uptake in different areas and different qualifications. So would the Minister accept that's the case, and perhaps that we should be getting more information about which properties are being let out, to whom, and more importantly, what quality those properties find themselves in at the point of being let?
We do. The deputy is sort of painting quite a black picture about the information which is or not which is available. There is a good amount of information available. Certainly, with regard to we have the housing needs survey, which is carried out on a regular basis. The census information does give us good information about who owns, the residential, how property is used, and there is information that these statistics units can help us with. Certainly, the access to housing is something which is of real concern to us. The genesis of this question was regarding the 2-1Es access to housing. I really want to emphasise that we welcome people coming to our island and investing in our island, and we need to ensure that 2-1E high net worth people are are recognised as being of benefit to our community.
Supplementary, sir.
Yes.
But does the Minister accept that there is also a law of unintended consequences, and where something might be done for the best of intentions, there may be inward investment? The Deputy of Grouville quite rightly asks questions about what those unintended consequences may be, especially when they are likely to have a knock-on effect on the local economy for local would-be buyers. Is that not a reasonable question to ask?
I think members will be aware that the Treasury Minister has committed to just completing a review of the value of high net worth people coming to our island, and that is due to be published very soon, within the next month or so. And I would ask members to look at that information very carefully when that is published, and I'm sure all members will want to take a view as to what they see within that document.
Final supplementary, Deputy Grouville.
Yes, thank you. Firstly, I'm not criticising in any way the high net worth individuals, so can we just park that? What I'm trying to establish here is our local housing needs and what is happening in the marketplace. And in the absence of any data, that the Assistant Chief Minister says that there is none at the moment, could he undertake to look into this situation? Because he did say that non-residents being able to purchase share transfer properties are benefit to the local population. Well, I'd like to know how as well, and sort of citing the housing needs survey, well, that gives us the problem. It does not give us the cause. So could he undertake to look into this situation so we know exactly what's going on in the market and what is pushing the prices up? Thank you, sir.
Certainly, along with the Housing Minister and others, the Housing Needs Survey does give a lot of information about what is needed within our community. And the issue with regard to whether buy-to-let is putting the price up for for people who are wanting to buy, the view that was taken many years ago when this was promoted as share transfer was that it was a way of increasing the supply of rental properties within our community. It was certainly something that was promoted as being of benefit generally to us. Whether that is something we need to take a different view on now, that may possibly be the case. But certainly I undertake that along with the Housing Minister and other ministers and the Environment Minister, who has decision-making about building of properties, we will continue to keep that as a priority.
Very well, we now come to question 7. The Connétable of Grouville will ask of the Minister for Infrastructure. Connétable.
Thank you, sir. Is any type of fuel oil used in the energy from waste plant, and if so, why? And will the Minister confirm that no type of fuel oil is needed in the day-to-day running of the plant?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Diesel fuel oil is used in the energy from waste plant for two purposes. The primary purpose is for the fuels to start the incinerator process, and in order to do this, it is necessary to heat up the combustion chamber before waste is introduced. This is to ensure that the emission limits will be met when the waste is burnt. Burning fuel on the startup is quite normal for energy from waste plants, and it is actually a requirement of the Waste Incinerator Directive 2000/76/EC, which is a standard to which the plant is regulated under the Waste Management Licence. The plant operates on a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week basis, so once the plant is started, it will run for some considerable time, often months, before it requires its shutdown again. The secondary function for the diesel fuel oil is to temporarily boost the combustion chamber temperature in the event of a particularly low calorific value or wet waste being processed by the plant. This secondary fuel is rarely used, and the majority of the time, the waste alone will support the combustion and maintenance at the required temperatures. So I'm happy to invite any state's members to come to witness the plant in action and how it is operated and maintained, and I would suggest that such a visit visit comes just before the plant is being shut down for one of its scheduled maintenance programs, sir, and again when we restart the plant.
Supplementary comment?
Yes, sir. My microphone's a bit temperamental, sir, like other people's, I think. If diesel oil is required during the running of the plant when the material is damp, wouldn't it be beneficial to put some of the cardboard that is at the moment being recycled into the plant rather than putting in another fuel?
So yes, as I mentioned, if wet waste, for example, is fed into the incinerator and there is a drop in the combustion chamber, the burners will automatically start and run for a short period of time until the furnace temperature is stabilised, sir. This is quite a rare event and covers a short period of time. But to answer about putting cardboard into the incinerator, sir, we currently produce some 2,800 tonnes of cardboard recycling per annum, sir, and it costs our department some £100,000 to do so. This actually is a far better option than us actually just burning the cardboard in the incinerator, where we have a typical cost of some £100 per tonne. So it would be some 2.8 times as much to burn it as it does to recycle it, sir.
Deputy Tadier.
Would the Minister be able to publish the amount of diesel that is used over a period of a year so we can actually see the fluctuations? I think that's the first question.
So in 2013, we used some 146,000 litres of fuel oil. In 2014, we used some 160,000 litres of fuel oil. And the most recent figure, sir, which I have, is for 2015. We used some 123,000 litres of fuel oil.
And so when we talk about the energy from waste plant having a certain output in terms of electricity, whatever percentage that is, and perhaps the Minister can clarify that, is that offset against the tonnes of diesel that we burn in order to keep the energy from waste running? And would he be able to say what the net product of energy is coming out of the harnessable energy that we get from that, and whether in fact it is negative or positive? And I appreciate the Minister might not have that information available now, but would he also endeavour to make sure that is published for transparency purposes?
So I believe, from memory, the energy from waste plant is capable of producing and does produce some up to 9% of the island's electricity uses, sir. But that's not its primary aim. Its primary aim is to dispose of our rubbish, sir.
So I appreciate that, but a supplementary, surely...
Well, I'm sorry, Deputy, that is the second supplementary. Yeah. Very well, I'll give you the further supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I think the point I'm getting at, appreciate that it's not the sole purpose of the energy from waste plant, but of course there are no doubt many tensions when it comes to the desire for recycling on one side and actually getting burnables into the incinerator so that we don't actually have to use an increasing amount of diesel. But is it not the case that if we were simply to use that amount of diesel to generate electricity without the energy from waste plant, it might actually exceed that 9%, or at least it would be useful to have those statistics for comparison purposes?
No, sir. The Deputy Tadier's conclusion is not correct, sir. And I invite him again, as I do any members, to come and actually understand how the plant works. It is a very complex piece of kit, sir. The electricity generated from it, although we don't get as much of that electricity as we would like from our Jersey Electricity Company, does produce up to 9% of the island's electricity needs, sir. But more importantly, we dispose of our waste in a compliant way with regulations, sir. And we need to also do our bit in terms of improving the environment and getting our recycling rates up, sir.
Final supplementary, Conor.
Thank you, sir. I think the Minister said it costs £290 a tonne to put waste through the energy from waste plant. And I understand that the problem there is the amount of unsuitable material that's going through the plant. If we could reduce that amount of unsuitable material or eliminate it altogether, perhaps, how much would that cost come down?
So typically it costs £100 per tonne to process waste through the energy from waste plant. If we, for example, added cardboard back into that stream, one, it wouldn't be the right thing to do for our environment, sir, but actually the cardboard that it costs us to recycle £35 a tonne, and if we were to burn it in the energy from waste plant, would cost £100 per tonne, sir. So it is actually financially beneficial to recycle our cardboard, but it's also beneficial for our environment, sir.
Very well, we come to question 8 that the Connétable St John will ask of the Minister for Housing. Connétable St John.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise what definition of household is applied for her work and that of her department? And given that definition, how many households are there on the island?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. For the purposes of housing and planning related work, we use the statistics unit definition of a household, which is one person living alone or group of people living together at the same address, though not necessarily related, who share a shopping bill, eat together and share the same living space. The statistics unit is updating the household projections based on the latest population figures, but using 2013 household projections as a baseline, a resident population of 102,700 would equate to approximately 45,400 households.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Is the Minister able to give an average number of occupants within each household?
No, sir, I'm not. I don't know if that data is available, but I can certainly ask and come back to the Constable.
Senator Rosen.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister agree that one of the challenges that societies face in Jersey and elsewhere around the world is the fact that due to the changing nature of society, three-generation families now are rarer. Young people tend to get married and start a family much older, and therefore the number of households in the island does increase at a faster rate than population.
Minister.
Yes, sir, I would, because, but also, as Constable said, we are an ageing society, and we all want to stay in our own homes, and that's a government policy is to look after people in their own homes. So obviously, it is going to change.
Deputy Tadia.
Does the Minister also accept, of course, that there is a housing shortage in Jersey and that housing is very expensive, especially for renters, so people are required to share housing, often amongst friends and perhaps work mates, but also that young people tend to stay at home much longer nowadays because of the difficulty of actually renting and certainly no aspiration of buying. So it is very much a two-way street, and that's why it's important to have up-to-date figures out there.
Yes, sir, figures are important, and that's what the stats units have been doing with the latest housing needs survey, and I can't think what else what the deputy said. I'm sorry, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just to acknowledge the fact that whilst there have been social changes about multi-family generations living together, of course, there is a counter trend where actually younger people are staying at home, and so in the long term, in the balance of it, it could be balancing out, but it is important to have those figures to monitor demographic and social changes.
Yes, sir, but on the other side of that, we need to continue to build, and what was in the island plan, what has been rezoned, and the private development, we need to continue to get that supply, but not only up and down, we need a constant level of supply going forward.
Final supplementary, Connétable St John.
Thank you, sir. It's just with respect to the draft budget that we are due to debate later in this assembly. It states on page 6 that there are 60,000 households on the island. I was wondering if the Minister might help me as to where the discrepancy has arisen.
No, sir. He's very observant. Obviously, he's read to page 6 of the budget, but I shall look at that and come back to the constable.
Very well, we come to question 9. The Deputy Southern will ask for the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister list the mechanisms that may be used to contribute to the tax gap between tax revenue expected and that produced from business and personal taxation? How many times and to what effect have rulings under Article 134A of the Income Tax Law been made? And what further measures, if any, are envisaged to clamp down on tax practices which contribute to tax avoidance?
Thank you, sir. Sir, jurisdictions that have produced and published tax gap analysis will typically identify the loss of tax revenue arising from 3 types of behaviours. Firstly, the amount of tax loss from people making innocent mistakes or misunderstanding their obligations. Secondly, the amount of tax lost from tax avoidance, where people enter into arrangements which could be strictly legal but contradict the intention of the law. And lastly, from deliberate tax evasion. As confirmed in the 2017 budget statement, Jersey will commence work on calculating its tax gap in the summer of 2017, and it is estimated it will take approximately 2 years to complete. Returning to Article 134A, it is the Controller's general anti-avoidance provision, where the Controller is of the opinion that the main purpose, or one of the main purposes, of a transaction is the avoidance or reduction of an income tax liability. The Controller can change the person's income tax assessment to negate the purported tax benefit. That's one of the mechanisms. This general anti-avoidance provision has proved an effective tool in countering the impact of abusive behaviour and deterring taxpayers from considering putting tax planning in place. In respect of the use of Article 134A, general anti-avoidance provision, in 2015, the latest complete year which data is available, our Taxes Office challenged 75 taxpayers in respect of investments worth approximately £18 million, which on their face did not produce taxable income. As a result of those challenges, income will be deemed to arise on approximately £7 million of these investments and will be taxed at the appropriate rate. The Taxes Office is continually seeking to address tax avoidance. For example, as part of the Global Common Reporting Standard Initiative...
I must interrupt you. You'll work well into the 1 minute 30 seconds normally allowed for an answer. I appreciate it's a complex question, but I wonder if you're able to bring your answer to a...
Apologies, so it is a complex question. I just wanted to make sure that members understood the full implications of what 134A does in protecting us from tax. Do I have your permission to continue? Won't be too much longer, hopefully,
For a short while longer.
Thank you very much, sir. Very much appreciated. As part of the 2017 budget, the Minister has proposed changes that will require local financial institutions to provide relevant information on Jersey taxpayers directly to the Taxes Office. Work to review existing sanctions against tax avoidance and evasion is currently underway in the Taxes Office. Early thinking will be considered by the Ministerial Steering Group for the review of personal income tax in the first quarter of 2017. The Tax Office will, of course, be looking at best practice work worldwide. On the back of this work, the intention is that during 2017 and 2018, the Treasury Minister will table new legislation which will increase the costs and penalties for deliberately evading tax and, for example, for incorrect tax declarations where carelessness or recklessness has been involved. Nearly finished, sir.
Well, I'm going to notionally add an additional minute to the time allowed for this.
Thank you very much, sir. In advance of this tougher framework, we will be offering a disclosure opportunity in 2017 which will provide all taxpayers with an opportunity to put their tax affairs in order. Thank you, sir, and thank you for your consideration.
Supplementary.
Yes, sir, and I would have been grateful for the opportunity to ask a supplementary earlier, but because what I want to find out is twofold. One, what mechanisms are expected to be in place to avoid paying tax, either under 134A or otherwise, and secondly, what estimate, since the Treasury Minister decided to investigate it, it must be significant sums involved, otherwise it wouldn't be worth doing. It's only twopence halfpenny, they wouldn't be looking. But what sort of estimate do they think might be being avoided at this stage?
I think the deputy did ask what mechanisms are there in place to avoid tax. Well, I think that's the words he actually used. I hope there are no mechanisms to avoid tax. We're putting in place as many mechanisms to stop people from avoiding tax, using Article 135A in its extended form. If I'm wrong, I'll give way to the deputy, sir.
No, it's not a question. You can answer the question, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you, sir. And sorry, I've missed the second part of the question by deviating.
I think it was how much might be lost. Was the second part.
Yes, that's a piece of work that's being done, and that needs to be done. Certainly, some work was done in the United States, and while we can't compare Jersey with the United States, they estimate it over there that 42% of tax is not collected, particularly from the black economy. That's cash in hand, and there's no reason to suspect that we are very far different from that. So that's one area of work that needs to be looked at, particularly where we know there is tax avoidance. However, having said that, most of those tend to be in the more labouring classes where you're hiring a handyman, and the cost of chasing them would probably be far in excess of the amount of tax would yield from actually taking them through processor.
Very well. Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. Will the tax department be looking at the use of companies by local residents in order to avoid tax?
Yes, sir, I think I covered that in the first part of my answer, sir. We will be looking at that, and all of their tax affairs will need to be disclosed to the taxes officer.
Deputy Tadier?
So I'm sure in the past it's been said that we're one of the most tax compliant places in the world, so in terms of efficiency of collecting money and loss, if you like, in terms of the overall yield. Is that still the case, or has something changed, or is it basically the jury's still out on actually whether that is still the case?
Unfortunately, the deputy's asked me to pass an opinion, and that would be possibly misleading. I can't give him a definite answer. Has it changed? I would expect it hasn't, but that is an opinion, sir.
I suppose, like maybe to phrase the question in a different way, do we know the statistics of estimates being made within the Treasury Department of how tax efficient we are in collecting revenues that are due? And we know that for the large part, tax returns are basically done on honesty, so people declare what they've earned. And there's perhaps that goes a certain way, but what statistics and hard fact does the Assistant Minister have to base this review on?
So there are no, I can't give the deputy the actual figures because we don't have those figures. All I can say that in Jersey we have a low, broad and simple tax regime which actually encourages people to comply more than ones that have a much higher rates of tax, where there's a lot more to gain from those high rates of tax for the individual. So I would, my assumption would be, with confidence, that we are still performing well compared to other jurisdictions. Thank you, sir.
Final supplementary, Deputy Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, what I'm, again, what would like the Assistant Minister to focus on is the areas which are causing concern, because obviously you wouldn't be going to look at the tax gap if you didn't think there was a tax gap there. And whether it's between the £80 million income tax that we get from business taxation, or it's the £400 million we get from personal taxation, where is the emphasis going to be between business and personal taxation in seeking to correct what might be seen as the tax gap?
Yes, the Deputy raised a good point there. I think the main focus is on where people deliberately contrive to avoid paying tax. That is where I think the greatest benefit will be found by employing a wider use of Article 134A to enable us to challenge much more strongly these measures. Jersey is a very professional financial institution, and people with monies will go to lawyers to find a way to get around paying more tax. Article 134A enables us to challenge those devices they may use to ensure we can get as much as possible from them. And it's keeping our focus on that part of the work and extending the penalties, hopefully dissuading more people from going through avoidance measures which are contrary to the spirit of the law, and that's what we hope to do, sir. Thank you.
We come down to question 10. The Deputy Tadier will ask the Chairman of the Committee to Conectar. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. Is an island-wide review of speed limits currently taking place? And if so, what methods are recommended for parishioners to submit suggestions to the review?
Chairman.
Thank you, sir. I should make it clear that the Committee to Cunnatab is not undertaking an island-wide review of speed limits. Constables have attended workshops arranged by the Minister for Infrastructure to discuss road safety, at which speed limits, among other issues, have been discussed. Under the road traffic law, it is the Minister for Infrastructure who specifies the speed limit on a road. But before making a change, the Minister is required to consult with the constable of the parish involved. If parishioners have any comments or suggestions to make, whether on speed limits or other parochial matters, they are always welcome to contact the constable at the parish hall, either in person, in writing, by letter or email, or by telephone. And I think some of us still have fax machines, sir, if people wish to use that. Should their request for a change in speed limit or parking arrangements or whatever be supported by the parish, those suggestions will be referred to the Minister for Infrastructure for consideration.
Supplementary, Deputy?
Thank you, sir. I'm grateful to the constable for the answer. So we know that the constables themselves are not conducting an island-wide review, but I'm still keen to know whether there is an island-wide review of speed limits going on. It seemed to be that the Transport or DFI Minister at the last occasion suggested there was, and I presume there's also strong working relationship between the Minister and the 12 parishes. So I think it's simply a case of knowing, because we do, of course, all of us, I think, get inquiries about speed limits, certain roads which people think should or shouldn't be reduced in terms of the speed limit, as well as traffic calming measures. So it's just a way of finding out what the best way to contribute to that review, and it would be helpful to know if the review were going on, first of all, because I'm sure some people might want to contact the Minister or the Department directly. Others may wish to contact either the Constables or the Roads Committee directly. So I think the Constable has answered partially already, but if he could just clarify to the best of his knowledge whether he knows of any island-wide review going on centrally which may have impact on the work of the parish.
So I really can't comment on an island-wide review. If there is such a review, clearly that would be a matter for the Minister for Infrastructure, and the question on that particular aspect of things should be directed to him. But so I can assure the Deputy and members that where parishioners do have an issue with speed limits in their own particular area, they do make their views known to the parish. The Roads Committee and the Honourable Police consider them, and if appropriate, we make representations to the Minister. For larger situations, I just remember before I became Constable in St Clement, there was a big issue. A lot of people were very worried about the 40-mile-an-hour limit throughout the parish. And I remember a major parish meeting was held, unanimously wanted the speed limit reduced to 30. But after I became Constable, I approached the then Minister for Transport and Technical Services and was able to convince him to reduce the speed limits for most of St Clement to 30 miles an hour. So if people do have concerns, make contact with your parish hall, that your concerns will be listened to, and if appropriate, action will be taken.
You want a final supplementary, Deputy Chair?
Yeah, so I just thank the Constable again. My concern is not so much the fact that people contact the parish hall. It's just a case of if it's been suggested that there, and we've heard it from the Minister himself, that there is an island-wide review of speed limits going on. So it's a case of actually when people contacting the parish, not being told, as I think may have happened in certain cases, that there's an island-wide review going on, and therefore it's not really something that the parish can necessarily deal with straight away. So it's a chicken and an egg in some ways. But I think just to thank the Constable for the questions, and it may be something that needs to come back as another question in a different format in the future.
Well, that's, if you wish to...
Well, sir, all I can say, sir, if there is a major review of speed limits going to be carried out in the island, I have no doubt that the Minister would wish to consult with the public in any event, sir.
We come now to question 11, that the Deputy of Grouville will ask for the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Deputy.
When is the Minister intending to reach a decision on whether Jersey will follow the UK in providing freedom of access to private pension pots?
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to advise the Deputy of Grouville that in the 2017 budget that has recently been lodged, the Treasury Minister has proposed another step forward in creating greater flexibility in retirement. Back in 2003, Jersey was ahead of the times in creating approved drawdown contracts. This is a mechanism through which individuals could have unlimited access to their pension funds on the proviso that they could prove that they would have sufficient income in retirement, this to limit the risk that they would fall back on the states for financial support later on in life. Tax is payable on whatever they draw out. Since last year, 2015, we have seen their usage increase where individuals have been permitted to take a tax-free lump sum before entering into an approved drawdown contract. However, in the 2017 budget, it is proposed that we go further, and in addition to the existing income test, a capital test will also be introduced. This will enable those who have built up a safety net of capital assets to realise them in order to support themselves financially through their retirement, and thereby gain access to the flexibility of drawdown contracts. This, sir, is responsible pension freedoms, allowing people to access their pension funds where the risk that they will fall back on the states for financial support later in life is extremely low. There will be a high bar test to ensure that future generations are insulated from having to support those who might choose to squander their pension savings. Sir, I hope members will support the proposals in the forthcoming budget debate in December. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
Yes, sir. The Assistant Ministers, I find the terminology somewhat patronising in that they expect, his department seems to expect that anyone with access to their pension pot is going to fall back on the state and squander their retirement pension. Does it not occur to his department and him that people might wish to invest in more lucrative schemes than the returns, and some of them very modest returns on a private pension pot? And this is not only better, can be better for the individual, but would certainly be better for the economy.
Certainly, I don't fear, unfortunately, I don't agree that the answer was patronising to people at all, sir. I think I think all of us should be interested on is protecting the taxpayer from having to support people who could have otherwise supported themselves. And I don't really regard that as being patronising. Coming back to the second part of the question, should people be allowed to draw down some of their pension pot to reinvest in more lucrative dividend-producing investments in particular? And the answer is, I'm sure that when they go through the high bar test, providing they can demonstrate that there will be good income coming from those, which would insulate them from requiring to fall back on the states, that is something that Treasury will look sympathetically towards, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Southern.
Yes, sir. Does the Minister not agree? I think I saw over half-term that in the UK there's a certain amount of rowing back from this provision, particular concerns about the mis-selling or mis-evaluation of packages, and the question to the Assistant Minister must be what measures, what consideration has been given in his budget proposals to this rowing back and this risks around certain issues concerned.
I thank the Deputy for that very good question. Actually, certainly we are very alive to the issue in the UK, which is actually the UK is taking a great risk in liberalising the ability for people to take back pensions, because many of those people are falling back on the taxpayers to support them in later life. We are very aware of that potential, which is why, as I said earlier in my speech, there will be a high bar that will have to be passed to enable people to draw down funds rather than just be able to draw them down willy-nilly, effectively, as they can currently in the UK.
Final supplementary, Deputy Ruler?
Does this stance, isn't it nanny knows best? And isn't it a case that we can and should be trusting an individual to be responsible for their own monies and not deprive them of further opportunities? And could the Assistant Minister please indicate who he is taking advice from? Is it those in the industry? Thank you, sir.
I think in answering the first part of the question, I have to consider what working families are doing today out there, working very, very hard, paying their taxes into the system and protecting them from having to pay more taxes through any forms potentially to fund people's lifestyles who have squandered their pension pots. I'm interested about protecting people from tax increases in the long term rather than giving somebody a nice break when they squander their pension pots. The advice comes from the tax planning officers within the Treasury is where I'm getting my advice from, sir. Thank you.
Well, we come now to question 12 that Senator Ferguson will ask the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Senator.
Thank you, sir. In instances where the ports of Jersey negotiate a lease with a new tenant, and that tenant is a company, has the Minister directed the ports of Jersey only to undertake such negotiations where the identity of the owners and directors of that company is in the public domain, and if not, why not?
So the short answer is no and no, as it would be inappropriate to politically interfere in a commercially confidential matter. However, I'm sure the Senator won't like that answer. So, however, can I just remind the Assembly that on the 9th of October 2012, this Assembly debated P70 2012, Incorporation of Ports of Jersey. And I note from Hansard the good Senator voted in favour at that time for that proposition. The report to P70 2012 stated, and I quote, "The primary goal in incorporating Jersey harbours and Jersey Airport is to enable them to continue to be a provider of essential lifeline public service to the island, but to do so in a commercial and sustainable manner that will improve services for customers and generate a positive return to the States." When incorporating the Ports of Jersey Limited, the States Assembly set a number of primary objectives for the company and also assigned to the company the responsibility for the direction, strategy and management of the business. Both the Treasury Minister and I recognise the independence of the Board of Directors in managing this business, including carrying out commercial port operations in the manner best calculated to secure sustainable growth in the economy of Jersey in the medium to long term. Taking account of that independence, it would not be appropriate for me to direct them on activity that would be considered to be part of the normal course of their business, including lease negotiations. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. I think the Assistant Minister has overlooked the point that the general public are shareholders of ports. And since this is their money, is it not understandable that they would prefer contracts with local companies with identifiable directors and shareholders, and where necessary, paying local tax?
I think we even need to recognise in this particular case of ports the different business model. The majority of people that the ports work with are not local companies. And I cite British Airways, EasyJet, Lufthansa, Flybe, Condor, and many, many others who are not local people. But we engage with them because they will produce the income and the facilities that we require to keep a vibrant economy going here in Jersey, sir.
David Sutton.
Yes. Does the Assistant Minister not recognise that by permitting foreign-owned companies to own substantial businesses in Jersey and to contract with the states thereon, that what he's doing is contributing to the tax gap that he wants to investigate between what might be expected and what is provided by foreign companies who don't pay tax to trade in the island. Surely this is just one example of a whole-scale movement away from local-owned companies to international companies owned elsewhere, and with the resulting drop in taxation for our revenues.
Very short answer. I do entirely recognise every point in Deputy Sutton's speech. That is why in every deal that the ports do, they are required to consider the net benefit to the Exchequer of Jersey, sir. Thank you.
And in the recent case, which I believe the Senator is asking about, that was a significant loss, and it seems to me that the Minister in his first answer has said it's entirely their business, it's a commercial contract, and he is aware at the same time this means a loss of revenue to Jersey government.
So I think we're entering into some difficult territory here because we're talking, I believe, about a specific case, a case which I'm aware that many members have been contacted on by an individual who has failed to secure the lease arrangements he required through Ports of Jersey because his bid just was not good enough. If it is that particular business, there have been allegations made in that business, particularly with regard to a company which they've identified in their communications, who has never been, nor never will, be part of the tender negotiations on that particular deal. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Fondre.
Yes, sir. I suppose the statement almost is that isn't there a risk that ports act in the interests of the company, but not the financial interest of the island as a whole? And I suppose what that leads to, I appreciate the comment, the Assistant Minister semi-addressed that. He said that ports are required to ensure there's no loss to the exchequer. What role does Treasury take in just monitoring that ports are actually adhering to that remit? In other words, where there is a significant financial transaction taking place, that the net outcome is a benefit to the exchequer and not a loss compared to where we presently were.
Thank you, sir. Yes, the Treasury has put in place a much more robust stewardship and governance procedure for all the state-owned entities, of which the ports are one of. We have a minimum of quarterly meetings with the directors, and as Deputy Fondre said, the companies are motivated to work in the best interest of the company, the bottom line profit for the company. But we hold the Treasury shareholder function, which I undertake on behalf of Treasury, requires the Board of Directors to ensure that all the work done by those companies deliver a net benefit to Jersey, sir.
So, can I go for a point of clarification? The Assistant Minister said net benefit to Jersey. Is that the same as a net financial benefit to Jersey?
Well spotted, and yes, I do agree with Deputy Fondre. Thank you.
That's a question.
Next question, Deputy Wickenden.
Sorry. Thanks, sir. Does the Assistant Minister agree that if members, as he's aware, did get an email that had misinformation, it would have been wise for the Treasury Department to contact members with the correct information to stop our concerns being asked in such a way as they are being right now?
This is a commercially, what we're talking about here in this particular case, and I'll take advice from you, sir, in the chair, if I go too close to straying into something where I shouldn't go. But this is a commercially sensitive deal that's being done by the Ports of Jersey. If one party who was unhappy with the deal wishes to make allegations about other people, that is a matter between that person making the allegations and the person they're making the allegations about. That's a deal between them. And we as politicians should take a much broader view of what is going on, rather than looking at a narrow view and reacting to that. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Kevin Lewis.
Thank you, sir. The Assistant Minister mentioned earlier quarterly meetings with Ports of Jersey. Would the Assistant Minister inform the Assembly what authority or influence he has over Ports of Jersey, if any?
Insofar as it relates to the subject matter of the question, which is the negotiation of leases.
With regard to this, with leases, none, sir. That's an operational matter. But where we do have influence is directly over the Board of Directors, and they will influence the operational matters, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Sutton.
Yes, sir. Is it another case that the Assistant Minister mentioned the duties of directors or the board to act in the best interest of the company? Surely the next bit of that sentence should say, in the context of doing business with the government of Jersey. Is it not that we should be encouraging a wider remit than strictly only in the interests of the directors or the shareholders?
I'm not sure I exactly know what question the Deputy is asking of me there, sir. Certainly the shareholder, as we've seen, we've seen in the press in the UK in particular, where there's been shareholder revolts where the company is not acted in the best interest of the shareholders. And certainly the Treasurer of the States represents the states and the shareholders in the AGMs. But we do hold all entities to a quarterly meeting where they present their business cases and their work going forward, sir.
does the Assistant Minister not accept then that it's not in the interest necessarily of the shareholder, which is the government of Jersey, the States of Jersey, to have that short-term commercial interest to take priority over the longer-term tax revenue interest of that shareholder?
I could just say yes, so I totally agree. The long term is always the objective, not a short-term gain for a long-term loss. We only look at long-term projects, and I can assure members that I am fully apprised of the situation that has been discussed, of the nebulous one on the side, and I'm fully aware of that, and I'm absolutely confident that Port of Jersey are acting totally responsibly in this matter.
Final supplementary then, Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. With companies like British Airways and so on, we do know the companies and we do know the directors. Now, ports are a strategic asset, and where possible, as I've said before, business should surely be with companies incorporated locally. Does the Assistant Minister not agree?
No, sir. As I said earlier on to Senator Ferguson, no, I don't agree. We work with business outside the island. But what I will say to Senator Ferguson and to all other members, that when the lease is signed on that particular deal, want of a better word, they will be fully aware of who they are and where they're based on what taxes they will be paying, sir. Thank you.
Very well. We now move on to questions without notice to ministers. The first question period is for the Minister for the Environment, Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure the Minister is aware this one is coming. It's following up on the answer of the Minister for Infrastructure. Can the Minister tell us, in relation to nitrogen levels that have gone into the harbour, what action his department took with regard to trying to get the department to stay within the law? Were there any fines? Were there any meetings? Can you please advise us what actions were taken by your department?
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'd just respond to the Deputy by saying that the limit of 10 milligrams per litre was a precautionary limit set in the 90s, and since then we've had a lot of scientific data and research to show that while it is a limit, there is absolutely insufficient reason to cause any harm to human or animal health. I accept that it's a limit which is difficult to understand when on one hand I impose a limit of 50 milligrams on Jersey water and then turn around in the next breath and impose a limit of 10 milligrams on the Department of Infrastructure, and asking the department to remove that amount of nitrate is difficult to comprehend. Moving forward, we've had lots of work has been done on this, but we have decided that a phased approach to the reduction of nitrates and a phased approach to St Albans Bay is the way forward, and the first phase of that is replacing the sewage treatment works at Bellazan, which is woefully out of date and inadequate.
Sir, can I supplementary? The Minister didn't actually say that this problem has been around for many years, according to the Minister for Infrastructure. What action did your department take in the past? We can talk about these new studies, new safe limits and so on, or what the latest scientific thinking was, but if there were regulations in place in the past and they were breached, did your department take any action?
Through the chair,
Through the
please.
chair.
Did the Minister's department?
So I can tell the Deputy that action was not taken, but on advice it was thought that it was not in the best public interest to do so, because the cost of doing something when there's no danger to human or animal health was preventary.
Senator Ferguson.
So, oops, sorry about this. Don't know which piece of paper I'm working on. Yeah, will the Minister recommend, given that all that's been happening, that the environmental regulator be made independent and separated out from his department, particularly given the fact that the regulator has issued 2 notices to the Department of Infrastructure and no further action has been taken? Would it not be better to have the regulator totally independent?
I'd have to give that some thought, sir. It's not a question I was expecting, but I can't see immediately why that would need to be the case.
Deputy Greville.
As the Minister is keen to see building permits come to fruition, what consideration will he take to time lapsed from the permit being given to delays in his own department, which could include decisions about design, changes to advice previously given, intervention by the historic advisor, responses to emails and phone calls, and also the increase in costs the new bylaws will create.
Minister.
So if I could deal with the bylaws immediately. Yes, I accept that there's an increase in cost with the new bylaws. Those bylaws are going to see, however, a reduction of or an increase of 30% on energy efficiency in properties. They're also going to ask homeowners to contribute a percentage of the build cost when they have an extension to their property, a 10% contribution of that build cost of that extension to environmental and energy efficiency measures in the existing house. Those measures are also going to ask any developers with properties, new builds over 1,000 square metres, to source 10% of their energy from sustainable sources. So I accept on one hand that some of these new bylaws are going to cost more money, but it's absolutely clear to me, sir, that the payback on those costs will be very short, and we will see major benefits to our carbon emissions. As regards the timing, and the Deputy alludes to the fact that my department is slowing applications down and causing additional cost, all I can say to the Deputy is that, as she will know, it's 8 weeks to process an application for a small works, which is one house or less, and 13 weeks to process application larger than that. And the latest figures I have from my officers show that we are meeting those standards in 95% of the cases.
Sir, could I ask a supplementary? Because I was referring to once the permit has been given. So once a permit has been given, the time starts to tick. And I believe he was keen to see the building come to fruition. But if there are then delays on design from the department, then there's no sort of time limits of 8 and 13 weeks, etc.
So I'm happy to liaise with the Deputy on any conditions which are put on approvals. I understand exactly where she's coming from, and if there are things that are happening which are delaying the start of processes, I'm happy to work with her on that.
Deputy Kevin Lewis. I'm sorry, very well. Comment to Hudson Taylor.
Thank you, sir. More than 5 years ago, by a large majority, the States Assembly adopted Part 23 of Amendment 38 to P48. And I wondered what progress the Minister's Department had made with it. To be helpful, and it was a marathon debate on the 2011 Island Plan, the states resolved that the Planning Department would look to see whether public access to La Collette 2 reclamation site could be achieved in spite of the restrictions of Buncefield. I was really wondering what progress had been made. Thank you, sir.
I'm grateful to the Constable for the question, sir, and grateful that he pointed me in the direction of the numbers that he quoted. He will remember that I think himself, myself, and the Minister for Infrastructure, very shortly after I became Minister, I asked them to come down to La Collette, and we walked from Havre Part on the outside of the reclamation site, and it was clear to me then that there was a fantastic opportunity to increase the public access along that side facing east. And I did ask, and we at the time agreed that it would happen. Very shortly after that, the Department of Infrastructure came back and said that they really would like to address the issue of the containers of asbestos before we allowed the public into that area. And I have to say I was disappointed, but we're working very quickly towards solving the asbestos issue. And I'm also given to understand that we've also had meetings recently where we've agreed that we will open part of that side of the reclamation site for public access. It's going to be a great addition to the amenity of that area. There's a large area there. Most of it's green. It's got great views, and I very much look forward to it being open.
Andrews.
Thanks, sir. Can the Minister explain why, after such widespread and successful public consultation, it is necessary to have a public inquiry about the planning application for Lekenebe School? What is the likely cost of such an inquiry, and does he truly believe this is the best use of public funds? Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir. The Deputy needs to understand, I think, the difference between a consultation on the preferred site by the Education Department and the necessity to have an approved planning application before you can start to build anything, and they are two very different and distinct entities. Education have undertaken a very good consultation where they looked at 3 sites, but that's not the same as having an approval from the planning department to go ahead with building, and in that instance there are a number of issues that need to be addressed. I thought that the proposal to build on the site was of island-wide significance. It's also a departure from the island plan because it's building in the green zone. And I thought under the circumstances that the best thing to do was to hold a public inquiry. I could have handed the application to the planning committee, but I felt in this instance that it was far better to have an open public inquiry where anybody and everybody can address the inspector, who then reports back to me with a recommendation. I have to say, sir, that, you know, Education did a very, very good consultation on the site, but that's not the same as having an approval to build a large structure in the green zone. And so it's very important to make sure we get all the planning aspects and considerations properly considered, and that includes the details for sport, for transport, and any other considerations that the parish or anybody else may have. This is a hugely important building, hugely significant for the education of children in the west of the island in the coming decades, and it's really important that we get it right.
Somebody, sir?
Yes.
So surely this is all part of the normal planning process. Why do we need a public inquiry at some considerable cost? This is the normal planning process. Why cannot the Minister make a decision on this based on the information he has already? Why have a public inquiry at some considerable cost, the public purse that could be spent on the school?
The first thing to say to the Deputy, sir, is that the cost of the public inquiry comes out of my department, doesn't come out of the Education Department, so I won't have any reflection on the cost associated with building the school. But I can only reiterate, this is a very, very important building. The application is contrary to the island plan. It's a large structure in the middle of the green zone. There's a number of issues that need to be thought about, and it's only right that an independent inspector comes over, considers all the planning issues associated with this application, and we make the right decision.
Going to Hobson Mary.
Thank you, sir. I was greatly reassured to hear the Minister confirm that 95% of applications are determined on time. Is there anything that can be done? Is there any consistency of concern that causes the other 5% to not meet the targets? Is there any common theme? And is there anything that we can do to boost that figure even further?
It's interesting that the Deputy asked that question, sir, and I apologise to Deputy Andrew Lewis for not fully answering the questions he asked previously. And I think one of the things that he mentioned was consultation. And there's no doubt in my mind that consultation is never wasted time. I think experience is showing us again and again that the more consultation you do before you make an application to the planning department, the easier it is to get through. Because in the case of Lekenebe School, if we have a public inquiry and the consultation has not been done, if the Education Department, or Property Holdings in this case, haven't identified other sites that might be available and shown the reasoning behind not choosing those sites, the inspector will ask, what are the alternatives? Why are you coming here? So I say to the constable, I think one of the reasons why maybe applications go over time is that not enough thought goes in before the applications are actually submitted.
Very well, if there are no other questions for this Minister, we then come on to questions for the Minister for Social Security. Deputy Sutherland.
Yes, sir. Can the Minister inform members where the legislation is in law drafting, if it's required, and when we're likely to see the regulations that cover the new income support personal care level 4, the flexible level that's supposed to cover home care? Could you tell us where it is in progress?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Deputy, for your question. In conjunction with the Minister for Health and Social Services, as he announced this morning that this will be in place hopefully by next July, we're working all the time. We are up to date with the Department of Health and Social Services on implementing what you term as personal care level 4, which will be the difference in the cost of home care on an income support basis from what people are receiving now to what will be the case in the future.
The Minister failed to answer the question of when we're likely to see any changes to regulation, especially in the light of the fact that whilst it's attached to income support, it actually has a completely different mechanism for assessing the level of need, which is due to be operated by social workers and not members of her staff. And there are some 334 in 2015 recipients of personal care level 3, which might be, and most of those, I should think, will be looking at making an application for personal care level 4, because they only have up to something like 7 hours of care a week under the present scheme at PC3, but at PC4 that would be much more generous. How is she going to cope with those sort of numbers?
I was checking the numbers yesterday, actually, and it does affect very few people, but that doesn't mean that it's not important. It's about 150 people that would be affected as it currently stands. And the idea for those who aren't aware of this is to fill the gap for those who would not be able to pay an increased rate of home care, so would then resort to income support in order to have that paid. And there is the time frame is working with Health and Social Services. We can't implement legislation until we know what the demand is going to be.
Deputy St John.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister advise whether she believes that the income received from income support should be included in the means testing of higher education funding, and if not, why?
Income support already pays for the 20 hours of childcare if obviously if the parents can't afford it, and so that is already means tested if the parent is on income support.
Sorry, sir, I think the Minister misunderstood my question. I asked with regards to higher education.
Sorry, I did misunderstand. As regards higher education, we do help with higher education with childcare costs, but as for paying fees for higher education, no, or helping with fees, no, we don't.
So on that basis, could I ask the Minister what analysis or what work she's carried out in terms of the number of people who receive income support that are above the threshold that's currently set for higher education limits?
Sorry, could I ask the Deputy to repeat that, please?
Could the Minister advise whether she's carried out any analysis as to how many people who receive income support are receiving more than that that's on the level for higher education? So currently it's 26,750. So has the Minister done any analysis on how many people within income support who are receiving that money are on a higher band?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister explain to members why she has rejected recommendation 10 of our Living on Low Income inquiry, which says the Social Security Department should consider creating a role for an officer working on behalf of one-parent families to pursue absent parents for maintenance. After all, their office, her department, knows where somebody works, how much they earn, and probably where they live. And it's far easier for them to pursue maintenance than it is for a single parent who may have also other issues with that missing parent, why she's rejecting that recommendation.
The easy answer to that, sir, is that we do not have an officer available in order to pursue that. And I've answered this question of the deputies before. Half the people on claiming lone parent support already are being paid maintenance. And as for pursuing the other half, the Social Security Department is not in this case really a debt collecting agency. And the whole idea in increasing the disregard for lone parent families to 23% from 10% is to encourage them to pursue maintenance in their own rights.
The Minister said she was giving us the easy answer. Can she give us the hard answer?
I think that's a request to elaborate with more detail if you think it appropriate, Minister.
I thought I'd given the details, sir. The single parent component was reduced, not removed. It's being reduced by £10 a year over the next 4 years in order to make a lone parent household equivalent to a household with a couple with a child. And as I said in my earlier answer, that the disregard has been increased considerably to encourage lone parents to pursue maintenance in their own rights. And I do appreciate that it's very difficult in some cases where the other parent will have left the island, in which case nobody can pursue it, and also in circumstances where the other parent has been difficult and abusive. I accept that, but it could not be an officer personally dedicated to that.
Well, Deputy Andrew Lewis.
Thank you, sir. Just a follow-on question from the Deputy St John's question about the higher education grant system. The Minister will be aware that joint household income for minimum wage would be about £28,000. The grant scheme starts falling away once household income is over £26,000. With this information, would the Minister feel that it's time that the Employment Forum reviewed the minimum wage? Does it use figures like that to assess the minimum wage, i.e. people cannot access the full grant system on a minimum wage? Does she feel that this is something the Employment Forum should be looking at in order to increase the minimum wage so that people can actually afford to go to university even with the grant system?
So as the Deputy is aware, the Employment Forum does a very wide-ranging consultation every year, and they will be doing the same in April of 2017. And what we ask them to do is pertinent to what's happening at the time. So this year, we asked them to look at increasing the minimum wage to move towards the 45% of median, and they've increased it by 20, well, their recommendation is to increase it by 21 pence. This has to be balanced with business and commerce as to, especially the hospitality and agricultural industries, as to whether they continue to pay such a high wage. So there's got to be a balance between the two.
Supplementary, sir. So my short question should have perhaps been, does the Minister, will the Minister ask the Employment Forum to also consider the cost of higher education, bearing in mind there is a gap between the minimum wage and the limit to which grants start tapering off? Does the Forum take this into account? If not, will she instruct them to consider it?
I don't know whether the Employment Forum takes this into account, so it's a very wide consultation, but I will certainly ask and get back to the Deputy.
Deputy Mezek.
At the next state sitting, we'll be debating my proposition on banning exclusivity clauses in zero-hours contracts. This is something that the Minister had previously said in response to a scrutiny panel recommendation that she did not agree with this. Could she just confirm whether she still is of that opinion and whether or not she'll be opposing that move to ban exclusivity clauses in zero-hours contracts?
Thank you, sir. I'm meeting on Friday afternoon to discuss the options of the Deputy's proposition. And may I thank him in advance of that for delaying it, which made life a lot easier for us to consult on it. And we'll come back with an answer during the debate. Thank you.
Conor Trinity.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister update the Assembly
about the health bonus regulations that were agreed in the States in July of this year?
So yes, I thank the Connétable for his question. I think this was a very, very necessary change to legislation from what was called the Westfield scheme or the 65 plus scheme, now known as the Pension Plus scheme for 65-year-olds. And there has been a considerable change, the main one being, which I know Deputy Southern was very keen to see, was that, and age concern, was that the people on the scheme were having to pay for their care, be it optical, dental or chiropody, in advance of then claiming back the insurance money. And this has changed now so that the Social Security Department will run the scheme and pay the practitioners directly, so saving pensioners having to do the administration themselves. So that's very positive. And also the fee levels have been increased considerably, all of which is going to be is being published. We've notified all the pensioners re the Christmas bonus as well, and so hopefully a lot more people will join the scheme.
Well, Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. And I'm back to recommendations in our Living on Low Income report, and particular recommendation 15, the Minister for Social Security should examine ways to reduce the number of over and underpayments in income support. Consideration should be given to payment in arrears rather than in advance. That has been rejected, and the statement is that operational improvements have already addressed these issues. Could she inform members what these operational improvements are and what figures she has to suggest that they've already reduced income overpayments and underpayments?
Yes, sir. The difficulty with this, as the Deputy mentioned, is that it's paid in arrears rather than in advance. That's the way the social security system works. And we are looking at possibly changing that. But changes in that sort of system, which is quite complex and requires legislation, will take quite a long time to do. And improvements have been made in overpayment and underpayment, and also great attention is paid to the individual when overpayments and underpayments are taken into consideration, mainly, of course, if the individual has been overpaid, which is the problem with sort of the fault, if you like, of the Social Security Department. That's addressed very quickly because we realise that people are not in a position to repay their overpayment possibly as quickly as should happen.
I didn't hear what the operational improvements were, nor did I hear any evidence that that's already been addressed. But what's worse is I heard the Minister say that this particular recommendation is under consideration when the written black and white statement says reject. Can she clarify?
The report asked for a change in the legislation, and that's why this has been rejected, because it's an ongoing process. We are working on it. We realise that the system of paying in arrears is sometimes not as effective as it should be. So there's no way that we could accept a recommendation that was a change in legislation when the work is already ongoing.
Are there any other questions for the Minister? Deputy St John.
Thank you, sir. Can I ask the Minister, the last Minister that was in charge of Social Security advised that there would be potential need to increase Social Security contributions because of ageing population. Can I ask the Minister what effect that the Common Investment Fund returns have had on the decision to delay those increases, or whether they will still be coming, and whether they'll be coming in one big tranche or as a gradual increase?
Thank you, Deputy, for her question. The Common Investment Fund, into which the Social Security Reserve Fund is invested, which at the moment stands at almost £1.3 billion. And the reason it's, two reasons why it's so healthy at the moment is because 20 years ago there was a large increase in contributions nominated, which was difficult to get through at the time, but it did. And that has put the fund in very good stead, along with very, very careful investments. And over Brexit, the fund increased by 240 million, which is quite considerable, but which has now been, some of the improvement in it has been hedged to protect it because it is a pension fund. So at the moment, it's in a very stable position, but Social Security, by dint of its nature, will not just look at the moment. It has to look 30 years hence. And with, as the Deputy so rightly said, a considerable ageing demographic, we have to look 30 years ahead. And so the Social Security Review, which was launched about 3 weeks ago, the first part of the consultation is to ask the public how they would like to look after themselves in their own retirement, in as much as to point out that perhaps they might have to help looking after themselves in their own retirement, because a fund is not going to necessarily, even though it's healthy at the moment, have the wherewithal to do that in 30 years' time. So that's part of the review that we're doing now in order to decide whether we need to increase contributions, which contributions, how to do it, how it would affect business, whether people should have a personal pension plan, as Guernsey are looking to introduce. So there's a myriad of strings to pull in, and that's why we're doing the consultation.
Sorry, supplementary, sir. Can I just ask the Minister then, does she not believe that we have a responsibility to ensure that those who pay into a social security contribution fund, such as the one that the Minister has referred to, have the right to have access to that funding at the time of retirement, and therefore we should be considering those increases to ensure that there's that ability to do that in the future?
You have 15 seconds.
That's exactly what the review is doing, sir. Thank you.
I'm afraid that brings the time allocated for questions to this Minister to an end. There are no items under J and K, so we come on to public business. The first item is the public elections introduction of STV and AVP 88 of 2016, lodged by Deputy Tadier. Deputy, I understand that you're prepared to accept the amendment of the Privileges and Procedures Committee. If so, then I will ask the greffier to read the proposition as amended.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the Privileges and Procedures Committee to bring forward plans for the implementation of A single transferable vote system, STV, for multi-member constituencies, and B, an alternative voting, AV, system for single-member constituencies, and to consult the public on those plans by summer 2017, and to bring a proposition to the Assembly and a report showing the outcome of the consultation before the end of 2017.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. So as members will have just heard, and also via emails, that obviously accepting the amendment, it obviously was my original preference that we could get this up and running for the 2018 elections, but I do understand and accept that actually in order for this to work, because I firmly believe it's the right course to take, it's still important that the public is taken along with us and that any system that they have, they fully understand. And obviously some of the concepts are not always easy to grasp in the first instance. So I hope that actually what we will see is a period of consultation and engagement, presumably led by PPC, but with the assistance of the GREF staff. And we know that already the information that's been disseminated to do with elections is increasingly becoming of good quality and widely read and spread out. So I think that's a good basis on which to proceed. As such, I'm not going to go into too much great detail, as much as I would if I was actually trying to win the proposition here today to convince members that we should adopt AV STV, but I think there are compelling arguments for it. I would simply remind members and perhaps the public that these aren't my recommendations, they're actually the recommendations of the Electoral Commission, and I think in some ways they're very much the forgotten recommendations, because they seem to be fairly uncontroversial in many ways. It's to do with the way that the voting system works rather than necessarily the constituencies in which the candidates are elected, which seems to always be the sticking point. And I think the point is that no matter what system we have, and it seems that certainly for the short to medium term, we are going to have a mixture of both single seat and multi-seat constituencies, and of course probably at least two types of member of the Assembly, of elected member, if not the current three that we have. I think it's widely understood how the alternative vote works, and I'll just quickly make the distinction. The alternative vote is used, and it's a preferential voting system, so you would rank your candidates from 1 to however many candidates they are. You don't have to use all of your ranking possibilities, and it's done for when there's only single seat constituency. So in the current Assembly, it would of course be for the positions of constable and for those deputies who are also elected in single seat constituencies, which are normally either parish representatives or park parish representatives, as is the case in St Brelade number 1 and St Saviour's number 3. Although only a moderate case was made for the benefit of alternative voting by Dr Rennick, and it's worth just mentioning that his report can be found on the Electoral Commission's website and on the State's website under the title of the Jersey State Assembly in Comparative Perspective. And if people do want to read it, about page 19 onwards, it does talk about the different voting systems that are available. I think we know quite clearly that if you have a single seat available to 4 potential candidates, it's possible for somebody to get elected with 26% of the vote, and there's no way of actually knowing whether that individual is the most popular candidate for that particular constituency. It may well be that actually that person would have still won under an alternative voting system, but it becomes much more likely as the individual support is marginal. Of course, if somebody gets 40% and the other candidates get the rest of the 60%, it's increasingly likely that person would get in anyway. So it stops the situation arising where you get unpopular candidates simply getting in because there's a split vote on the other side. I think that's generally understood. The single transferable vote, I think, has to be said, is slightly more complex in its inception because, of course, it does involve a quota, but it works on the same principle that all candidates pass a threshold to make sure that they are the ones who need to be elected. And it's actually much more representative in terms of allowing a spread of representation for this Assembly. So I think I'll make the case there. I don't need to go on about the pros and cons or in depth. I think we're going to have a process over the next year and a half where members and the public can engage in that. Of course, I look forward to hearing members' views on what's being proposed today and hopefully for general support when it comes to the time of implementing the alternative voting systems, be they AV or STV, when the time arises. Sir.
Proposition seconded. Well, does any member wish to... Deputy Wickham?
Thank you, sir. I think firstly I'd like to apologise to you, sir. I'm in my speech going to explain the STV system in great detail, and I'm no way insinuating by talking through the chair that you do not know how it works. It's just the way it is. So, sir, I've asked many people over the last few weeks about the STV system and what they feel it is, generally in the higher level of people that vote, which is generally in the older demographic. And I said to them, if I ask you to categorise every person on how you like them, the preference, so 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, because that's how we're changing the system, would you want to know how it all works in the background? Would it be important to you? Would you not just be happy knowing that the system's changed, it's about a higher proportional representation system rather than a majority system? And their answer in every instance was no. I'd actually want to know why and how it affects my vote by changing the way it works. So I started to explain how the STV system and the math behind it works. And they got turned off straight away. And they said that it would put them off voting. That they wouldn't properly understand how their vote actually counted or how it mattered. It was too complicated for them. And these are our voters as current. So I guess the best way of doing it is saying, let's go through and explain quite how complicated the STV system and what it means and why it's called a proportional. I'm already putting people to sleep, I see, sir. Why it's a proportional representation rather than a majority representation. So it makes it more complicated because to get your quota of how many votes you require, what you need to do is, after an election has taken place, get all of the votes that have been cast and count them. So in the 2014 senatorial elections, that would have been 28,604 votes. So the first thing that would have to happen is you have to count up all the votes to know what it is. You then divide the number of votes by the number of seats. So again, if we look at the numbers from the senatorials in 2014, that would make a quota of 3,577. Sorry, there's a +1. You have to add 1 just to make sure that the figures go right, that you meet a quota. I then took the figures from the senatorial election. I divided them by 8, sir, because to make sure that it got the right numbers, as everyone gets, there's 8 votes they get cast, we need to bring down the numbers. That meant that nobody met the quota for the senatorial elections at all. So that's all right. So what we do then, because nobody met the quota, is we take the person on the bottom and we disqualify them. But those votes don't disappear. We go and use their second vote. So whoever they voted for second, it goes to the next person. And then we recount and see, did that anyone meet the quota? And no, it didn't. So we go to the next and we disqualify somebody below. And then we use the second vote for that person, or the third vote if they got any of the votes from the first person that was disqualified. And then we count up again and see if anyone met the quota, and it didn't. So the way I'm looking, in very rough figures, it didn't. So we have to then disqualify the next person, and then their second votes or third votes for the last person that was done, or the fourth votes from the person before that was disqualified, have to be added into the person to see if anyone meets the quota. Wow, that's going quite a lot of work to actually start adding this all together.
So
if you're
will
doing
the
it
deputy give way,
manually,
sir?
I'll give way, yes.
Yeah. It's just, I think it's important that if he's going to be giving these examples, we know actually what the quota is. So would he tell us what the equation is that's being used? What is the overall number of votes that he's talking about that are in there, and actually what the number of votes that individuals have been getting and whether they pass the quota? Because I think we need to know those statistics in order to make sense of what he's saying and whether, in fact, what he's saying is correct.
That's a proper request for clarification, so you can...
Thank you. I thought I did, but I will say it again. So we take the 28,604 votes that were cast in the senatorial elections for the 15 candidates. You divide it by 8 because there was 8 seats, and you add 1, and that gave me 3,577, which would be the quota.
Okay, sorry, would the candidate, would the speaker give way? So I think he's unintentionally misled the House. It's actually, you don't divide it by 8, then add 1. You actually divide it in brackets by 8 plus 1, and I think, and then add 1. That's actually it. Could he just reiterate?
Well, I think we need to bring some order to this. If you'd like to put that in the form of a question, actually for clarification of Deputy Wickerton's speech, then that's perfectly acceptable. Let's take that there is such a question.
So in such a question, I think by the fact that in brackets divide it by the number of seats, and there's 8 seats, you divide it by 8, and then you add 1. So that's the number I got. So anyway, I'm working on these figures, but the figures are, I cannot be clear on the figures properly because we don't grade people. So I've had to divide the results by 8 just to try and give what would plausibly be the first vote. Okay?
So sorry, can I ask to give way? Because the deputy is incorrect in his assertion, and I think we wouldn't want to start on a premise which is incorrect. So I found...
Deputy Talley, if you excuse me for a moment. It is open to any member to ask a speaking member to give way in order to seek a point of clarification on that member's speech. And it seems to be that it's a matter for the speaking member as to whether the speaking member will give way. If the member gives way on every occasion, then we will have a very interrupted speech process. If the member thinks it's appropriate to give way, well then standing orders provide that they are able to do so. So it's a question firstly for Deputy Wickerton if he is giving way at this juncture.
So I don't think I'm misleading the House where I'm using figures and telling you how I'm breaking them down to get what I want.
The first question is, are you going to give way to Deputy Tadier on this occasion for a further point of clarification of your speech?
So I'm just going to carry on to go through.
I
think I've made my point. It's really easy, this system, isn't it? very simple. Obviously, I'm going to go into a technology and how that can help things in future days. There's a different side of it. So on the same light, if somebody did meet the quota, what happens then is that you take whatever their quota they went past. So forget the 3,577 here. I'm going to make it easier and say that the quota was 1,000 and that the candidate that came through in the first line of counting went over by 200 votes. What you can do there is that actually it says, where I've read it a lot, there's two ways of doing it. You can take a random 200 votes from the candidate and then reallocate the seconds, but that's a bit of a lottery. So there's another way of doing it, is you recount all of the person that got through his votes and break it down into their seconds and divide it by the number of votes that went over the quota, which was 200. So you divide the number of votes by 200 and then add that to whoever they were actually allocated to in the seconds. Again, not very easy as you start going through the system. So as soon as somebody goes over the quota, then you have to reallocate the votes that are over into whatever the second votes are so that it's there. Again, I just want to make the point, it's not that easy to do, and asking people in the town hall and that they have to go through this, it's going to take a long time, certainly for the senatorials, and it's actually going to mean that if there was a recount because somebody's requested a recount, it's a very, very long time to go through it all again. Without technology, this system is unmanageable. So I think that goes to the point of how complicated this system goes to try and get to the proportional representation in the manner, but it's not undoable. It's been done around the world all the time, mostly using a technology system. You would not have paper-based voting, you would have what would be e-voting. The difference between e-voting and i-voting is e-voting is where you have a console in your polling station and you select what you want. I-voting is internet voting, so you can do it from a mobile phone or a tablet remotely somewhere else. But e-voting would need to be in place because the computer system in the background would do all the work for you, sir. Then it goes to what does it mean by proportional representation versus majority representation, and why this would affect a slight change or a possible change in the way that elections are done. And then you have to kind of understand how that works. So we'll put a scenario that Deputy Labby, in his first line of voting, had voted for the person that was the 4th out of 10. For instance, the 4th most popular in that number. And then Deputy Lewis, for instance, had voted for the person that was got the least number of votes in the first round. Well, what we'd do then is disqualify the person that Deputy Lewis voted for and say, well, Deputy Lewis, you get another vote. Who did you want otherwise? So then we would take the second vote, but that person didn't get through, unfortunately, so we disqualify them and say, okay, Deputy Lewis, we want to give you another vote, which is where Deputy Labby was saying, what about my second vote? Sorry, your candidate's popular, you don't get another vote yet. So Deputy Lewis then re-votes again, the same person as Deputy Bryans had voted for, but that falls off. So Deputy Bryan now has to vote a second time, and Deputy Lewis has to vote. It's about getting and making sure that we have a better representation from both sides of politics, or whatever side of politics, so that a minority view politician that's standing has a better chance of getting in, so we have a stronger proportion of different political views within the system. This is what this system is designed to do. So it's about, do you want proportional representation, or what we have now is what's called majority representation, where the people who get the most votes get the seats, because that's what in majority people have voted for, and that's how it goes through. Anyway, I think I've probably said enough there. I think in the technology side, we're going to talk about that later in another proposition, which is about where it goes. It is possible to do this, but we need to do it in steps. We need to get our electoral register in a digital format. I will talk more on that later in the day. But once we've got that, we can start looking at doing the electoral voting in the polling stations where there's a screen, but that needs to be costed. We need to understand that we have voting every 4 years, and how are we going to pay for it? Is there a way to rent it? Is there a way that we own the software? How much will it cost to get these devices into the polling stations? It goes on and on. So I'm happy to go out to the public and consult and ask them what they think of this system and whether they would be happy with it. I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. Right now, when I read the proposition, it actually says to request the Privileged and Procedures Committee to bring forward plans for the implementation of A, STV, B, AV, and then it says, I don't know if it's a C, to consult the public on the plans by summer. I think that I don't want to say yes to A and B now because I want to hear what the public have to say before I say I want it. Because the wording says to implement and then A and B, I think that means that by voting yes now for A and B, you're saying in advance of the public consultation that that's what you want. So I would rather say no to A, no to B, and if it's a C, I would like to say that C, to go out and actually do a proper consultation with the people of Jersey so they could feel that they better understand it and they want it, and then come back to us, then we can vote on A and B based on the report that's been made by PBC. Right, I think I've said enough there, sir. I hope Deputy Labby wasn't clear, so maybe, sir, no, I'm not. Thank you, sir, and thank you for everyone listening to me there.
Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. There are three types of people in this world, those who can count and those who can't. And you've always got to wait a second for the penny to drop with that one. I have always been 100% in support of AV and STV. I think they are objectively more democratic than the first past the post system, and the advice that was given to the Electoral Commission by Dr. Rennick very, very clearly said that whatever our electoral system is in terms of what model of constituencies or categories of states member we have, it is objectively a better voting system irrespective of any other considerations. And I think he was right to say that. And a few points have to be made. The first is that every new democracy around the world, whether it's a country like South Africa when it's ditching its apartheid system, or whether it's the Eastern Bloc countries becoming democracies, some of them albeit just temporarily, they always adopt a form of proportional representation, usually STV. They don't opt for a first-past-the-post system because they're just not seen as being particularly fair or representative. And first-past-the-post system can be used to completely exclude minority points of view. And of course, there's a legitimate democratic concern that minorities in a parliamentary system shouldn't become the majority if they are a minority. But there is also the other point that minorities do deserve representation, not to be completely excluded from a parliament just because they don't make up the majority. And I think that our block vote system of first past the post is broken because in multi-seat constituencies in Jersey, it's possible to obtain 100% of the representation on 30, maybe 40% of the vote. And that is not incredibly easy to describe how that works, but I think about it, use this example, and I'll use simple numbers to I hope that makes it easier to understand. Say we're having a senatorial election for the 8 seats which are up for grabs, and there are a whole bunch of candidates, and let's say, hypothetically speaking, that there's 8 candidates who stand and say that we think education is the most important issue of this election, and they stand on a platform that's reasonably similar. You've got another 8 candidates who say, we think the economy is the most important issue in this election, and that's what we want to focus on. And you have another 8 candidates who say, no, we think health is the most important issue at this election, and that's what we're standing on. The group that think education is most important, say they get 30% of the vote. You've got the group that thinks the economy is the most important issue, they get 30% of the vote. And the group that thinks that health is the most important issue, they get 40% of the vote. What's the result of that election? The result is that every single seat goes to the 8 who thought that health was the most important issue, and the people who thought education or the economy end up with no seats whatsoever, despite the fact that they were actually 60% of the electorate. That's how our multi-seat constituency model works, and that is completely unfair, and it means that within this assembly there are sections of Jersey society politically who end up unrepresented in certain categories of our membership. That must surely on democratic grounds be wrong, and the single transferable voting system is the way to overcome that, and it will give this assembly and the wider public a much better way of judging who actually is the most popular politician in the island, who has the strongest mandate to lead the government, because we don't actually know. And when I've had conversations privately with Senator Ossoff, I've tried to explain to him that it's actually, even though he came 8th in the last senatorial election, it's entirely possible that he may actually be the most popular politician in the island. Indeed, indeed. That is theoretically possible, because of the 10,000 or so votes he got, it may well be the case that every single one of those 10,000 people turned up to the polling station because they were enthusiastic about voting for him, and who they gave their other 7 votes to may have just been, oh, you know, I'm at the polling station, they seem all right, I may as well give one. In terms of knowing who the voters are actually enthusiastic about, there is no way of knowing that from our electoral system, because you're given block votes rather than preferential voting. And I think with a preferential voting system, that would be the real way that we would find out who actually has the strongest mandates, because it's not just about number of votes when you can't distinguish whether you were getting someone's first vote or whether you were getting somebody's 8th vote. This would get over that, and I think it's absolutely the right way to go. Deputy Wickenden said, and I made a note of this particular quote, he said, without technology, the system is unmanageable. I agree that technology would certainly make things much easier. If we had an online voting system or electronic polling votes, e-voting, any form of that, that would clearly make it much easier, because everything gets inputted into the system. They've got it connected to the formula. You press a button, it works it out and can tell you what's going on. So I accept that it makes it much easier, but I don't accept that without that technology, it's unmanageable. There are paper systems of STV that are used in other jurisdictions, and there are some jurisdictions which have been using STV since before the technology would have even existed to do that. Yes, it takes longer to count, but when the public have to put up with whoever is elected for 4 years, can we really say, no, it's not worth moving to a fairer voting system because it might take a few extra hours to count it? I think that's a really, really poor argument, and actually what happens on our election day, whether it's how we vote or whether it's how we count the votes, for the sake of a few hours to make sure we actually get the right result at the end, I think there should really be no debate there. It's clear that STV on all criteria is a fairer, more proportionate electoral system, which will make this assembly more representative no matter what system we have otherwise in terms of categories of members or constituencies. So I'm glad that Deputy Tadger has brought this to the Assembly. It really isn't as complicated as some people think it is. If you type in STV on YouTube, you get videos, cartoons that are made to explain to student councils at schools how it works. It is easy to understand. It's difficult when you stand up to explain it because you can't see the charts as they go along, but if you have a voiceover with the chart alongside it, it's really easy to understand. It just means that unpopular politicians who happen to have a vociferous minority who support them can't overrule the majority, and the politicians who get elected are actually the ones who are most popular. But most importantly, it means that people no longer have to vote tactically. They can vote according to their conscience. I've got friends in the UK who, at the last general election, absolutely did not want the Conservative Party to win, but they weren't overly enthusiastic about the Lib Dems or the Labour Party, so they voted Green. And I tried to explain to them, well, in a particular constituency where it's a Tory Lib Dem marginal or a Tory Labour marginal, if you're voting for the Green Party, you are essentially wasting your vote because there is no chance of that candidate winning, even though there may be an anti-Tory majority. And that, of course, works in any other combination of parties you want to use it. This means that you can vote according to your conscience and know that if that candidate isn't particularly the most popular, but a similar candidate who has a similar platform and a similar set of values is more popular, you can give them your second preference to say, okay,
not ideally the one I would have wanted, but somebody who I'm prepared to accept has more in common with me otherwise, and I would be happier for them to represent me than I would the other candidate who's the one who I least agree with on issues. So I think this is the right way to go, and I will admit that I'm very disappointed that it looks unlikely that it will be in place for the 2018 election, but I hope very much that it is in place for the 2022 election, and I look forward to hopefully contesting an election under that format.
Senator Green.
And I'm pleased to follow the previous speakers, but in particular Deputy Wickenden, who I think gave a very good demonstration of how difficult it is. This proposition is well-meaning, sir, I've no doubt about that. But I think we need to learn the lessons of the past. I don't believe that ad hoc, random changing of our electoral system without looking at it as a whole is the right way to go. I also believe we've got the cart before the horse with this one, sir. Because if we're going to make that sort of change, we should go out and consult. We shouldn't agree this is what we're going to do and then ask the public what they think. If we're really going to make major change to our electoral system, we should go out and consult first and then come back and debate what that might look like. I'm not going to talk for very long, sir. For those reasons, I cannot support this well-meaning proposition.
Comment, Arbison Town.
Yes, thank you, sir. I'm very pleased and grateful that Deputy Tellier accepted the amendment of Privileges and Procedures Committee, because that does enable us to do the work that is necessary without making the commitment to transfer to the system, which we would have had to do had his proposition not been amended and been adopted. So what we would do the work, decide on what is the best system for Jersey, and consult with the public and bring a proposition back to the states as to whether we go in this direction or not. One thing, which is one of the few times that I've been able to say it, I do agree totally with what Deputy Mezek had to say this morning, because there is much merit in both the STV and the AV systems, because I think as one of some previous speakers showed, there are much fewer wasted votes, and what you can be absolutely sure of is that the most popular candidate at the end of the day will be elected. And that, I think, is very important. I think it was Deputy Mezek who pointed out, with a senatorial election with 8 seats, or indeed in some of the larger constituencies, the St Helier 4-seat constituency, the 3-seat constituency, you can never be 100% sure that the most popular candidates have been elected. They may well have been, but you'll never know, unless you move to an SDV or AV system. And the system actually is easy. Instead of putting an X, all you do is you rate the candidates in your order of preference, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many it may be, and how many you actually choose it to be. But where I do agree with Deputy Wickenden, I don't think that this can be successful until we have the technology in place to do the counting. That's absolutely important, because I can just imagine it would take days and days, unless our electoral system is changed, to get the results, particularly of the senatorial election. And they would all have to be counted in one place, obviously, because it has to start taking people out and transferring the vote. So it couldn't happen, I don't think, until the technology is in place. But, we already use the AV system, don't we? We use it every 3 years. It will be every 4 years when we elect ministers or chairmen of scrutiny panels or other. Because if there's 3 or 4 candidates and no one gets an overall majority, what do? We take out the last candidate and have another vote. And if there's still no one's got an overall majority, we take out the 3rd candidate and we have another vote. That's the same system as if we did it once, we just put 1, 2, 3, 4 in order of preference. That's exactly what we're doing. So it is simple, it works, and we know it works, and we know that that way we get the most popular candidate to become minister or chairman of the panel. But what is important, what's very important to me, and I'm sure to all of us, is that the public have trust and faith in the integrity of the voting system. And that is going to be a major job in consulting with the public. Somebody said during one of the discussions on this subject, I don't know who it was, whether it was Professor Rennick or somebody else, that the public do not need to understand how the system works. I disagree totally. I think the public, if they're going to have faith and trust in the system, they must have the ability to understand. They must know how their votes are treated. And that will, if we decide that's the route we want to go down, it's very important to me that people do understand and appreciate that position before we introduce it. And that's why we made our amendment. I think it's important that we do investigate the system because there is so much merit in it. There are complications, certainly, but there's much merit in the systems because what you're absolutely sure of is the most popular candidates get elected. And I think that's important. If we get that across to the public, then I think we can move ahead. Thank you, sir.
Senator Balash.
So it seems a very long time ago, but I chaired the Electoral Commission, which commissioned the expert evidence from Dr. Rennick. And it is true, as Deputy Tadier says in his proposition, or in his report, that the Electoral Commission was in principle in favour of introducing STV and AV. The difficulty is that the recommendation was a subsidiary recommendation. It was a recommendation which followed the assumption that the Assembly would accept the principal recommendations of the Electoral Commission, which involved reforming the composition of this Assembly. And the Assembly, not this Assembly, but the previous Assembly, wrongly, in my view, very wrongly, refused to accept the judgment of the public in the referendum and refused to pass the legislation to give effect to those changes. So what is being asked at the moment, and here I agree very much with Senator Green, is that we are being asked to put the cart before the horse. We are being asked to shelve the principal recommendations for electoral reform, and we are being asked to bring in a change to our voting system, but the voting system is going to be changed against a background of uncertainty as to what the electoral system itself is going to be. And that seems to me to be a mistake, and if the matter comes to a vote, I shall vote against the proposition for that reason. But I don't particularly want to vote against the proposition because I agree with Deputy Tadier in principle that reforming the voting system is a good idea. It's just that I don't think that this is the appropriate time to do it because we don't know what our electoral system is going to be. So I'm going to test the feeling of the Assembly to see whether there are others who are like-minded by moving, sir, with your permission, that the Assembly moves to the next item on the order paper. I'm not sure I ought to remember, but I don't, whether I need your leave for making that proposition. But if I need your leave, I seek it to move that the Assembly moves to the next item on the order paper.
Thank you. If you would bear with me then for a moment. So the position is that for a proposal to move to the next item, the consent of the presiding officer is required. The test that the presiding officer, as you may recall, applies is whether or not a sufficient number of people have had the opportunity of speaking, and as a rule of thumb, we would not give permission for that unless at least 10 members have spoken, and that is not the case at the moment. Accordingly, I don't allow the proposition at this point.
So may I ask a question, point of order as well? Not because, of course, there might be, after the 10th person has spoken, another request to move on to the next item. That there's another test under 85.2, which is whether it's an infringement of the rights of a minority, and it would be helpful to know whether or not what you rule on that, sir.
Well, the test is normally met by consideration as to whether 10 members have had the opportunity of spoken, that it's not simply open to someone immediately on the opening of a debate to allow the matter to move on. But if it is made again, I will consider the matter afresh at that point and make a ruling if required to do so. Had you concluded your speech, Senator? Conrad Harbison-John.
Thank you, sir. Electoral reform is something that has been discussed since Clothier some 16 years ago. And one of the recommendations of Clothier was that we accepted his recommendations in full or not at all. And he was adamant, do not cherry pick. What have we done for the last 16 years? Had various different electoral advice and cherry-picked ad infinitum. Let us put this to bed and stop. Let us take stock until we are able to do some clear thinking as to how we want to progress. I think, speaking for the public of the island, most people are fed up with hearing about electoral reform. On this particular item, I think probably the easiest way of describing it is if you were to go into a restaurant and not have a big breakfast, and the waiter comes and says, what would you like? And the first person says, well, I'll have steak. And he said, well, we might be low on steak. Do you have a second choice? He says, yes, chicken. Says to the second person, what would you like? I'll have the fish. And we're a bit low on fish. What's your second choice? Chicken. The third person, what would you like? Oh, steak and ale pie. We might be a bit short on that as well. What's your second choice? Chicken. And says to the fourth person, what would you like? Oh, I'm a vegetarian. I'd like the vegetarian pie. And as a second choice, oh, well, I suppose I'll have to go for chicken. And half an hour later, the waiter comes in and he dishes out 4 helpings of chicken. Not one person has got what they want. I rest my case, sir.
Senator Farnham.
I couldn't have said it better than the last speaker, but I concur with Senator Balash, and I just wanted to remind members of what ultimately was the right decision the Assembly made some time ago to choose a single true election day, which it did. But of course, the Assembly chose that. And Deputy Le Fondre's smiling across the Assembly at me. I think he might have had something to do with it. But the Assembly decided to go ahead and do that, sir, before it had agreed the Constitution of the Assembly. And of course, the rest is history, which led up to the disastrous referendum, with not only which had a very, very small turnout, but we ignored the result. And I think if we carry on trying to pick off electoral reform in bits and pieces, we're going to end up in a similar mess, sir. So it's for those reasons I'm going to have to vote against this today.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Le Fondre?
Yes, sir. I think I've just rather felt that people are making rather a lot of mountains out of molehills on this debate. As far as I'm concerned, this amendment, this proposition as amended, is about ultimately PPC, let's check it, to request PPC to bring forward plans for STV and for AV. We've taken out for the elections, and to consult the public on those plans. I've never had a problem with a designated body, PPC, for example, bringing plans together and going to consult the public on them. That sounds great. And to bring a proposition to the Assembly and a report showing the outcome of the consultation before the end of 2017. So it's been clear we're not committing to a system, we're committing to consulting the public on that. That, to me, seems a fairly responsible way of going forward. And how many times have we been told, I think it's Senator Green, actually, his favourite thing, there's nothing worse than a perfect plan. Isn't it? Isn't it? You know, and you get these arguments, we've got to have the whole package before we can move 1 inch forward. And the trouble is, how many times have we seen that and it doesn't work? We end up stalled completely. And I think, actually, I'm thankful for Senator Farnham for reminding that actually one of the changes I'm pleased to have achieved was effective what is now called a general election. My actual proposition at the time was any elections in 1 year to be on the same day, because we got into the position where the senators had all the razzmatazz, as it were, the deputies kind of struggled along 6 weeks later, and then actually at one point I remember attending an election for Constable in St Lawrence, and I think the turnout, and that was another 6 weeks later, and it was kind of one man and a dog coming through every hour. I'm not being obviously being facetious, but the level of turnout just went down lower and lower and lower. No, it was well before a lot of us in the Assembly were ever in this Assembly, I'll tell you that. I'll tell members that.
We have lively elections in St Wons.
Thank you.
Lawrence, yep.
And the point was the turnout of the separate elections we used to have just got worse and worse and worse. And that was the reason we went for that. Obviously, what then happened, we weren't going to necessarily, was the referendum a referendum? Was it a yes, no, or was it a choice, and all that sort of stuff? But anyway, I used to be very firmly a first-past-the-post person. And I can actually say that without taking my teeth out as well. But what actually brought it home to me, there were a couple of things. One is I did go to the presentation that Dr. Renwick did however many years ago it was, and I was quite interested to hear how it all worked. And I think, yes, it is important the electorate have the ability to understand, but the way that Conor and Clement put it, you know, all they need to understand is that they rank their candidates. Now, anyone should be able to do that. If they want to understand the system, fine, there's ways of doing it. I don't think they actually need to understand the formulaic response that Deputy Wickington was putting out there. But what actually kind of tipped me from the first past the post to certainly going out and consulting people on it, and in fact I just borrowed my colleague on my right's iPad just to check, the UK 2015 elections, okay? SNP got 4.7% of the vote and ended up with 50 seats. The Liberals had 7.9% of the vote, so reasonably more, and ended up with 8 seats. And that can't be right. And that goes back to the point about fairness. And so on that basis, I accept there are complexities in there, and I think Conor Clement touched on those. I see no reason why we can't go out and ask people about it and get to the reaction. If the reaction is no, fine, we listen. But I think this Assembly should give them the choice, because I think it is actually about fairness. I don't think it's necessarily that how votes are treated should necessarily be rigidly tied into the structure of the constitution of this Assembly and all the positions. I think this is how votes are going to be treated. I think that can be separated out, and I think we should be supporting this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Andrew Lewis. Deputy Andrew Lewis.
Thank you, sir. I think we've heard some fascinating arguments for and against the principles of AV and the single transferable vote. But I guess today what we're talking about really is whether we should ask the public about this or not. We've actually been asking the public about electoral reform now for probably about 20 years. And we haven't really got very far. And frankly, it's embarrassing. When I meet constituents, it's often a topic of conversation. And it's not a comfortable discussion to have, because we are extremely poor at reforming ourselves. This isn't uncommon to the states of Jersey. It's common to parliaments across the world. And that's one of the great things about democracy. You can have this debate without getting taken out, and taken out literally. So it's wonderful to be able to talk about it freely in a parliament like this. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we're actually making very little progress. And this is, again, an opportunity to discuss a fine point regarding electoral reform, AV and proportional representation. they have their pros and cons. I pulled up a graph which The Guardian published recently about the last elections. And when you look at it, it's fascinating reading. It's a bit, as Deputy Rafondre was suggesting, it does change the face of politics if you change the electoral system, the actual way you vote. Is that a good thing if you haven't decided as to how your assembly should actually be galvanised in the first place in terms of its actual constitution, its actual makeup, which we haven't done? In fact, we've done it very, very poorly so far. We consulted with the public, we had a referendum on it, and then this assembly, I wasn't part of it at the time, but some of you decided to reject the will of the people on that occasion. Now, I wasn't here for the debate. I'm sure there were some great arguments given for not accepting what the public wanted. But I think that's a poor reflection on this assembly when you have a referendum and then ignore it. There's far more fundamental things to discuss and debate before we get to actually the system of elections, the actual voting system. And included in that would be the electronic system as well, which the public often say to me, why can't it be easier to vote? If you make it easier to vote and then make it quite complicated as well at the same time, that creates further issues. So the issue here, sir, is we've got to look more closely at ourselves, the assembly I'm talking about here, rather than the individuals, and the great work that Privileges and Procedures are currently doing in consulting with members to formulate something that takes everything into account, including potentially this as well, so that we can then go back to the public and consult again. We don't have that information yet. Unfortunately, the PPC process has perhaps been a bit slower than some would like. I'm sure there's some good reasons for that, but it is slow. We are now more than halfway through this Parliament, and we still don't have anything that we can present to the public as a viable proposition, of which this type of electoral system could be part of that consultation. So I think we're in danger of piecemeal approach, yet again, to reform, of which just the voting system is just one element of it. So I would urge members to reject this and wait for PPC to come forward with an overall proposal that we can all agree or not agree to, and then go to the public with that to consult, of which this may form part of. This is piecemeal approach, yet again, to reform. I think it's a bad way of going about it, and we may end up with some unfortunate unintended consequences as a result. I think wait for PPC to do their work, of which this may form part of, that I think it should form part of, and today I think this is the wrong time to have this debate until we have PPC's full report on reform. So I would urge members to reject this in favour of PPC coming forward with a thoroughly thought out process which goes some way to resolving the consistent questions we get from constituents about when are you going to reform the Assembly. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the Deputy Master?
Thank you, sir. And as a former chair of PPC who had touched on this matter, I suppose, just to add to the Assembly, I do remember one of the things from Dr. Rennick's presentation is that the STV AV vote has suggested you only change the result about 5% of the time. Just so it's record. The Constable of St John said, very amusingly, in the way that no one got what they wanted through the different system. But then I suppose the other side of the coin is, yes, but no one got what they didn't want. And frequently the point I get made by members of the electorate is, it's not so much a point of it's someone that I vote for. I'd really like the opportunity to vote someone out, to vote against someone, if that were there. And does this system enable that? Well, one way of looking at it is, again, on this theory of I'll just use a UK example because it's something which we can relate to, whilst appreciating that, of course, Jersey is more an independent system. But if you take a constituency within England at the moment with one seat, so for example, the Conservative Party might get 40% of the vote, Labour might get, say, 28%, Liberal Democrats get 24%, and the Green Party 10% of the vote. What it shows in that constituency, the majority of the constituents actually don't support a Conservative MP, but under the first past the post system, that's what they get. So the STV AV system attempts to produce representation which is more reflective of the views of the electorate as a whole, not what is sometimes called, Deputy Wickenden said it's a majority system. Well, actually, it's more, the first past the post system produces a significant significant minority system option. Anyway, moving on to STAV, if you did have that system with the 40%, you would lose the Green Party's 10%, and say that went to the Lib Dems, which then would have your 28%, which would be more than the Labour. Labour would then go to the Lib Dems as well. So then that constituency might get a Lib Dem MP under a different system. It's just how the votes are counts. And I don't think, when we talk about, because this has been the rumour, the murmur, oh, the public are sick to death about constitutional reform. Well, when was the last time we actually asked them about the voting system? Ever? We've asked them about the constituencies, about number of members and how that should be done, but actually counting how they get into the Assembly and how that should work. We've never actually put that to the public. And actually that's why today I will be supporting this proposition, because I think it's fair enough to actually ask the public what they think about a different method. Fair enough, they might come back and say, we absolutely hate it, please don't change anything, we're quite happy with first past the post. But I think it's absolutely right that they should be given the option to tell us that in a managed way through PPC, and therefore, sir, I will be supporting this proposition today. But I give the, again, as other members have said, this is just about a consultation, it's not actually committing to one particular system or another. Thank you, sir.
Constable Greville.
Yes, sir. I wonder if I could ask some clarification from you, sir. This proposition appears to me to commit us to introducing STV and AV, albeit that we're going to be consulting. If the general public are dead against it, we're still committed to imposing STV and AV. If I'm right, sir, I've got to vote against it. Not necessarily that I'm against STV and AV.
Well, I think it's important to look at what the proposition reads as amended. It's to request the Privileges and Procedures Committee to bring forward plans to consult the public on those plans by summer of 27 and to bring forward a proposition to the Assembly and a report showing the outcome of the consultation before the end of 2017 for the implementation of a single transferable vote and an alternative voting system. So that seems to me that what is being done is a consultation exercise which will result in a report before the Assembly together with a proposition, as yet formed and unidentified, relating to an STV and AV. That is my understanding of the proposition.
Yes, sir, it's my understanding as well, but if the general public are against it, PPC has still got to bring forward a proposition. Well, a proposition isn't required if no changes.
Well, they haven't got to bring forward a proposition. It doesn't specify what the proposition should be within this. It could be a proposition that reflects the outcome of the consultation report, in whatever form that may be. Well, did you wish to speak, Constable, or was it simply that matter of...
No, sir, it's just that I will be voting against it, not necessarily against the...
Senator Rosen.
Thank you, sir. So the Constable of St John's said that we needed to stop talking about electoral reform. And I understand he's a member of PPC with me. And I have to say to him that I'm sorry that we cannot stop talking about electoral reform, and I will say to him why. So, a number of speakers I enthusiastically agree with in terms of the contributions that they've made, particularly Deputy Wickenden actually explained the real nightmare that people will have in understanding it. And this is not a casual concern. It is a real concern. So, some people have used animals in analogies, and there is an expression, I think, sir, that a camel is a horse designed by a committee. Now, I know some members of this Assembly like committees, and I've got nothing against camels, but we do have an electoral system which has been designed by a committee, and it was not effectively the horse that was designed. We've ended up with something that actually is a real muddle. Our election system is worse, and I've got nothing against camels, sir. it's a dog's breakfast, and that's nothing against dogs either. The fact is that it's been tampered with, it's been adjusted, and we've ended up with a system. And I have stood in this assembly before and spoken and said that we should have electoral observers in our next general election. And I think that I'm the only member of this assembly that has been privileged to actually be an election observer. And I don't say that I know anything about, I don't know everything about elections and observer and democracy, but when so you have been an election observer for the CPA, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, or the Assemblée Parlementaire de la Francophonie, which I was in both cases, I've done it twice, you understand what election observers do. It's not just about looking at the count. They actually look at the efficaciousness, at the properness of the whole electoral system. And all countries have to submit themselves and should submit themselves to international observers. And I want to avoid a situation, sir, that we will welcome international observers of proper standing from our Commonwealth friends. And I want to avoid them. I've got no problem with them actually coming and testing the count, because as Senator Ferguson and I know, there is no issue with the count, because we prove it. We proved that when Senator Ferguson quite legitimately and properly asked for a recount in the last senatorial election. And in fact, the jurats, who should be complimented for their work, actually showed that they do excellent job in terms of, with all the officials, in terms of the count. The real problem, sir, and of course this will be a real nightmare in terms of a count, certainly AV and STV is much, much more complicated and cannot be tabulated in the way that it can be done. And there are other problems too. But I want to avoid a situation where electoral observers will come, and we will welcome them, as good and proper parliamentarians, coming with no vested interests, just looking at the strength and depth and appropriateness of our democracy. And I have to tell members, sir, that they will condemn our system. They will condemn the fact that it is lacking significantly in voter equity, and it is lacking in voter equality. Deputy Tadyer may shake his head, sir, but I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to say to the Constable of St. John, there cannot be any more putting our heads in the sand about our electoral system. It does not pass muster, and it will not pass muster to anybody. We may be comfortable with it, and we may think it's fine, but actually on any international test of democratic properness, our system is wrong, and wrong to a very significant extent. And the reason why that is relevant, sir, to this debate, I'm hearing some murmuring, sir, but I don't know whether that's in support or not, I don't know. The fact is that we have to solve, before we're told by outsiders, because I think we're good enough to solve these things ourselves. I want to see our electoral system reformed. Yes, there will be compromise, but yes, you can get something that works, and something that works better than what we have at the moment, which is to an enormous extent wrong on the system of voter equity and voter equality. And sir, I am with the chairman of PPC and all members of PPC in wanting to bring forward, and I think I asked the chairman or president before, I think it is about a month off when members will actually see the deliberations of the committee's work. Everybody won't be happy, we know that, but we're trying to find a system that is better and more defendable than we have at the moment. And we will try, and there will have to be some compromises arrived at. And so it is at that time, when the committee has concluded its work, which is now imminent, and those matters have been put and after the significant efforts of members in the lunchtime sessions and the button pressing and all the rest of it that's been done, which actually I was a bit sceptical about, but actually has proven to be of enormous merit in developing the committee's thinking, that will be able to be put before members and then properly consulted on. It has to be completely wrong, sir, to jump the gun and say that AV and STV, I always a bit worried about when I say that, so it sounds like a sexually transmitted disease, I think, but I don't wish to say that. But I'm afraid to say, sir, that it is not simple at all. There are advantages and disadvantages in this. And I am sorry, but it is not right for members to vote in favour of a proposition that I respectfully, and I include myself in this, don't really understand. And I would suggest, Deputy Southern may remonstrate, sir, but I would challenge the mover of this proposition to, and if there is a proposal to move on to the next item of business, then I will do so after. I would support that if some member was to bring that later. I'm not proposing that now.
Well,
because
can I interrupt you for a moment? Standing orders require, as we're now past 12:45,
yeah.
That I ask the Assembly whether they wish to continue. It might be helpful if you indicate how long you think you will be speaking for.
Very shortly, pretty shortly, sir. Not for more than about 3 or 4 minutes.
In which case, do members wish to continue at least until the end of this speech?
Yeah, I will. I'll be even quicker then, sir. So basically, what members should do is they should not vote in favour with respect of this proposition. I suggest that actually we hold a prototype election. 500 people, 100 people could actually do an example of a vote with an STV or AV and see what happens. Because I think that if members see what happens, then they will actually know with confidence whether or not this is something you want to go to the public in. Deputy Wickenden explained, this is fiendishly difficult, complicated. And I'm afraid it also won't work, sir, with people and members saying, oh, it's just as easy as just simply putting the numbers in order. There is something, sir, called donkey voting, which is a disadvantage it's called donkey voting, yes, so it's called donkey voting. And it is a system which basically ranks candidates because they're alphabetically organised. And that's a disadvantage to some people with one end of the alphabet and the other. And members don't need to believe me. They need to look at the evidence of the international universities and people who study these matters, which see also the substantial disadvantages in these issues. So I'm afraid we cannot continue to have a system which is tinkered with and then ends up by being an even worse system that's actually not going to be understood. And we can't, if we're honest, not many members could stand up and actually say what this system really is going to end up meaning. Because it's all very well working out the mathematics, but it's also what it means and what the effect of that means in terms of returning members of this Assembly. And I will say one last thing, sir. So there was a referendum on AV held in the United Kingdom in 2011. The UK held a referendum where 19.1 million people voted, and it was rejected by 32% of people in favour and 67.9% against. Now that was on a system which is effectively AV, STV, or something in the middle. And that's proven there is public opinion on this issue. Yes, it was past the post, and yes, there are different issues, but that also applies here, sir. So we need to deal with electoral reform, and we need to do it properly. And we need to do it with proper research and all the arguments set out and on the back of what PPC is going to be bringing forward, and not another piecemeal piece of tinkering, which is actually going to end up probably alienating the people that put us here because they don't understand it, and they certainly won't understand the consequences of it. There are some advantages in it, but no, not at this stage. It would be outrageous for us to vote in favour and consult the public when we don't even understand it ourselves. Let's wait a month, see what PPC's proposals are, and then see whether or not we can put an STV or AV afterwards. It's the only sensible way of doing it. Any other thing would be unacceptable, and frankly, we would be doing a disservice to the people of the island that put us here. Thank you, sir.
Sir, may I ask a point of clarification? Can I just confirm that the previous speaker is a member of PPC, and therefore I assume I did not support this amendment when it was considered at the committee stage, sir.
PPC does not have a collective responsibility. And therefore, when the facts change, I change my mind, sir. And the facts have changed because I've actually thought about this, thought about the consequences of it, and I've changed my mind. Even if I did think that the PPC's amendment is a jolly sight better than the nightmare that was put forward by the original proposer that was actually just going straight out with something. It's even worse. It's not less worse, but the answer's still no.
I think that goes rather further than the point of clarification.
I move the adjournment, sir.
The adjournment is proposed. The State stands adjourned until 2:15.
Thank you.